Hi, everybody. Before we start the episode today, we just wanted to take a moment to mourn the passing and pay our respects to Sheldon Menery. If you don't know who Sheldon was, he was the godfather of the Commander format and the leader and face of the rules committee from the time of Elder Dragon Highlander until now, when it has become the most popular format in Magic.
Yeah, his deck was the first deck.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. Every time that I remember hanging out or meeting with Sheldon, he's just, he is an incredible wit and super smart and so kind and giving. And so his impact on the format, as well as he's really the reason that a lot of us are here today and is a huge inspiration to so much of the content we will do and from now until forever.
Yeah, I mean, Sheldon's the heart and soul of the format. He had a very clear vision for what he wanted Commander to be, starting with just like sort of a brain teaser and a time killer for judges to a global phenomenon of kitchen table magic. And I think he's very proud of what he made, and I think he's very proud of all of you. He's a large part of why I'm here. He's a huge supporter of the Commander Sphere when I first started and was a cheerleader my whole content creator career. So he will be very missed.
Yeah, I'd like to just... we were really lucky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a guy.
Yeah.
It's, man... He dedicated so much work to just make sure everybody has as much fun as they can with their friends.
He would always go the extra mile to try and make it to events, even when he was hurting.
He was so sick.
Yeah, and that kind of dedication is, you can only have just admiration for a soul like that.
Yeah, I want to say that I had so much respect for how he led the format. You know, Sheldon is super thoughtful. He really listened to like opposing sides. He would seek them out and have deep conversations. He really took his responsibility like super seriously. I didn't always agree with him. I know a lot of people out there didn't. And that's one of the things I respect about him a lot, because he took a lot of flack and there was a lot of anger and frustration sometimes from us, you know, and publicly. And he was just a class act at all times. He was not about self-aggrandizement. He was always thinking about the format and what was best for it. And I think... you know, that's why we're lucky, because there's probably parallel universes out there where Commander never makes it because it doesn't have, you know, a steady hand at the wheel like Sheldon. So, yeah.
True steward.
A very sad day. I think he would probably be laughing at us for crying like this right now.
Like, you didn't see this coming?
Yeah, exactly, you guys.
We've been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
So we want to send him off in style. We have a pretty cool clip from Magic 30, when he was announced and he got to walk out and get up on stage, and we can think of no better send-off than watching 1,000+ people cheer him on. So farewell, Sheldon. You will be missed.
Please, everyone on your feet for our last guest here.
But that's not all. The players are important, yes, but so is the person who will have to keep them in line. It is our great honor to introduce the moderator and judge for today's game, a man without whom none of us would be here playing today. He's one of the original members of the Rules Committee and known as the founder of the Commander format. Put your hands together and show some respect for Sheldon, the Godfather, Menery.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai. Rachel, I'm excited to talk about some Wilds of Eldraine cards that go in the 99.
Me too. The set is so many like cool techie cards, and some of them that seem really, really powerful in specific situations. So excited to talk about them. We're going to be talking about the ones that we think you're going to see the most of. Of course, we can't cover every card that could possibly be in the 99. That's all of them.
All are possible. It's true.
But we're gonna talk about some cool ones, or maybe some ones that are a little bit more difficult to evaluate. But before we get into it, of course, if you want to pick up any of the cards that we talk about in this episode, you can do so while supporting the show at cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of sealed and singled products that you can pick up at any time, but now is a great time to do it because there's a brand new set out. We are back on Eldraine, a very fun and flavorful set, and they have a bunch of different versions of cards, specifically like the enchanted sheet cards are the ones that you got to be really specific about what versions that you're getting, and you can get all of those at Card Kingdom because they have a huge selection of cards, and when you buy them, they're all going to show up in one package on your doorstep, safe and sound. You're not going to be chasing envelopes down for the next couple of weeks.
You also won't be chasing emails, though.
You won't be chasing emails either.
Because you're dealing with one retailer. They're very good with customer service. Yeah. Everything about Card Kingdom is great.
We love Card Kingdom, and you can support the show by shopping there at cardkingdom.com/command.
And of course, once you get those cards, you don't want anything to happen to them. You want to keep them in pristine condition. Ultra Pro is the game accessories brand that we here at the Command Zone trust our own collections to. ultrapro.com/command. That's our affiliate link, and that is the place to go to pick up Ultra Pro products. They have awesome playmats, deck boxes, sleeves, dice, wall scrolls, if you need it in order to play the game, or if you just want it, I guess, in order to play the game. If you want your battlefield to look awesome, or the room you play in to look awesome, Ultra Pro has you covered. ultrapro.com/command is also great because the website has a lot of discounts all the time and a lot of special deals. So often you'll just find, huge percentage off of stuff because they're trying to move inventory and move in new product and things like that. But also they have secret layer style drops, limited edition drops, stuff that you're not going to be able to find anywhere else, and it's only available for a limited time. It's really good to sign up for their newsletter so they can kind of let you know about those things as well. So again, ultrapro.com/command.
And it's a very special time for the Command Zone and specifically game nights, because we are in the last few days where you can submit your audition to be a fan on game nights, to appear and play and get knighted on game nights. You have to submit your audition, I believe, in the next 2 days. Yeah,
it's just a few days left. There is a limited audition window because at a certain point we have to close it so we can go through the auditions and choose the winners. But if you've ever dreamed of being on game nights, we will fly you out to LA. We will hang out. We're going to play not just on camera. We do a lot of hangouts, and then we do play on camera. You're going to get a chance to, bring your favorite deck and show it off to the world. It's a really fun time. We enjoy when the fans come here every year, just hanging out and getting to know people, and they always do an awesome job, and the game is always really exciting. So if you'd like that to be you, like it was Violet, it was Joe, then there's a QR code on screen right now, I'm sure, and there's a link in the show notes. There are some terms and conditions. Just make sure you read through those. But you need to get your audition in, which means you'll have to record your audition on your phone or whatever is fine within the next few days, because, again, that window is going to close.
Yeah, and if you want a special shot at becoming a fan, sign up as an annual patron, because one of the fan slots is dedicated to a patron that signs up for an annual subscription.
Speaking of patrons, good segue.
I nailed it.
Yeah, that was good. You teed it right up. Speaking of patrons, we have a bunch of perks for our patrons, and one of them is that we shout out one lucky patron every single episode. And this episode is dedicated to Spencer Rayborn.
Thanks, Spencer.
You rock.
You do rock.
I recognize Spencer. Spencer, you've been around for a while. We've interacted multiple times over the years. Spence, I don't know if you would go by Spence, but Spence, thank you for your support over the years. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, main topic.
Let's do it. We're going to be talking about a lot of sweet cards from the Wilds of Eldraine, starting with a banger. This card is sweet. A doozy. Yeah. We are in alphabetical order, but we are starting with one of the coolest cards in the set, if you ask me. It's Agatha's Soul Cauldron. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact. It says you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creatures exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and it has an activated ability that says tap exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control.
Wow, it's doing a lot.
Wow. Yeah, that was a lot. That was 3 paragraphs. 2 of them were static abilities. 1 of them's an activated ability. All of them extremely powerful.
Yeah, we've seen this card in action, and if you've seen the most recent episode of Game Nights, which should be out at the time you're watching this, you will have seen it in action as well. And basically, as soon as it hit the table, Kibler played it. I was like, oh. It's like layers of O, which you know usually means it's good.
And it says every creature with a +1/+1 counter on it is now twice as scary, 3 times as scary, 4 times as scary. Because it depends on how many things.
It gets more scary because they get,
they exile more things underneath it, and then they have more abilities. Like in that game, there was a Steel Hellkite exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So we had like 2 or 3 creatures that were still Hellkites. We were like, cool. So just nothing with a +1 counter can deal combat damage. And if we don't block it, you could just put a +1 counter on it.
Yeah.
And turn it into a Steel Hellkite before damage. Really
that's just
scary
one
stuff.
thing, right?
Yeah.
As the game goes on, you might have a Steel Hellkite and a Mana Dork and a Tim and a whatever under it, right? So now it's like every 3 or 4 of your creatures have 3 or 4 different abilities that you get to choose from. They all become Kenriths kind of. So it's very, very powerful. Also, it's easy to just discount the fact that it just has Graveyard Hate on it.
Yeah.
Just a 2-mana artifact that only said tap and exile a card from a graveyard. I don't think that's playable, but it's close to playable.
But it's good.
Yeah. And
it's not fun to play, but it's good to play.
Yeah, it will be very good, and will turn off certain decks that are like, well, I'm Muldrotha or something. Well, I guess you'd have to predict what they're going to get. It would make Muldrotha worse, but it wouldn't shut it off. But it shuts off often things like Deathrite Shamans and things like that. Getting rid of the lands. Oh, sorry, you don't get that.
That
they go to target something with Animate Dead. No, never mind. Like, it turns off a lot of cards. So just that part is almost a playable card. And then they give us all this other stuff that's crazy on top of it.
I was thinking about this and I was like, okay, so what are the activated abilities that are going to be the easiest to work with Agatha's Soul Cauldron? And my first thought was abilities like sacrifice abilities.
Yeah.
Because they put themselves in the graveyard. They're easy to exile with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And then you get that activated ability on any creature with +1/+1 counters on it. So something like a Douthie Voidwalker is extremely brutal because now they're not like, if you keep this Douthie on board, you're exiling stuff when the Douthie's on the real Douthie is on board.
It's total Graveyard Hate, yeah.
Yeah, and then if once you sacrifice the Douthie to cast one of those spells, now you've got the Douthie in the graveyard, and all of the creatures that you have with +1/+1 counters on them remember the cards that were exiled with the original Douthie, and you can cast those also. Like, it's
imagine your opponent had like 4 Douthies out. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
It's so annoying.
And they've got like 3 cards exiled under it. It's like, okay, they have access to a counterspell and also a creature.
Yeah, exactly.
It's becomes so hairy. Even something just as simple as a Sakura Tribelder.
Yeah, it seems really good.
Now, like if you have a Sakura Tribelder exiled underneath it, if there's a board wipe put on the stack, you're like, that's fine. I'll just sacrifice all my creatures and get that many lands.
Yeah, I'll get 4 lands. Like you didn't exactly 4-for-1 me, right? Like it's still not great, but hey, it does make my next turn very much more powerful, and recovering from a board wipe is usually cramped by mana. So yeah, I think a Steve under the Agatha is something we're going to see a lot because, again, it puts itself in the graveyard and is going to be annoying.
Yeah.
I like you have Ranger Captain of Eos on here.
Oh my God. What a nightmare. Because now, so Ranger Captain has an activated ability that says, sacrifice it, your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. Now imagine that every single creature they have with a +1/+1 counter can do that.
It's in white, so it could be like in a token deck.
Yeah.
So imagine you've got a token deck and you're like, I got 7 tokens. I sack my Ranger Captain of Eos to make it so you can't cast non-creature spells. And if I've been able to put +1/+1 counters on my tokens, then it goes to the next player's turn and you're like, cool. During your upkeep, I sacrifice one of my tokens so you can't cast non-creature spells. And then the next person, and it's just like, yeah, that's pretty nuts.
It's backbreaking. And these are just sacrifice abilities, right? Like there's tons of activated abilities that are really dangerous to have repeated activations of, where like a Heartless Hidetsugu is bad if they activate it once. If they activate Heartless Hidetsugu, sack it, exile it under the Cauldron, and now have 3 creatures that can also Heartless Hidetsugu at any point.
That'll usually win the game if you're in an odd life total when you do it.
Right.
All you have to do is time your life total and know you're going to do this. And then, yeah, you're in red, so you could even be like Thrill of Possibilities. Put the Hidetsugu in there. Agatha, now I have 3 activations of Heartless Hidetsugu. now because the creatures with the 1/1 counters have already been on the battlefield, so they don't have summoning sickness. And that's the one thing that usually you can at least say about Hitotsugu is it doesn't have haste.
It doesn't have haste.
Yeah.
Unless you give it haste.
And sometimes you just do that and you have a draw happen because you were going to lose anyway. So
yeah, the cutest interaction that I saw online was with Tree of Perdition. So Tree of Perdition has an activated ability that says exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness. Now the tree's toughness is 13, but any creature with a +1/+1 counter on it could have toughness of 2 at minimum.
Yeah. The thing people should know is when a card refers to itself in this way, you should read it as if it says this card. So this technically reads exchange target opponent's life total with this card's toughness.
Right.
And so when this ability is given to, let's say, a 1/1 soldier that has a 1/1 counter on it, you would exchange target opponent's life total with this card, the 2/2 soldier's toughness. So you'd be like, cool, now I have a 2/30 and you are at 2 life.
Okay.
And again, that's the type of thing that you
can do it haste.
Yeah, you could mill yourself and do it. You could discard it and do it. And that's pretty fun. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
It's pretty sweet. I mean, you're sitting there like, I'm at 105 life. I'm totally fine. Actually, no. I mean, even just stuff that's scary on the board and you don't even need multiple activations. It's something like an Urza has one of the most powerful activated abilities in Commander, giving, it says tap an untapped artifact you control, add blue. So it doesn't matter if you have multiple Urzas, but if they like answer your Urza's in the graveyard, and then you cast Agatha's Soul Cauldron and suddenly Urza's back.
Yeah, and they're just like, I can still tap my artifacts for mana. Plus, you get the activated ability of shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. Because that's another activated ability. There was a card on here we skipped, but I did want to talk about it because it's interesting.
It is kind of interesting,
Which is Glenelender Archmage, which is another card that has an activated ability and puts itself in the graveyard. It says, pay a blue, sacrifice Glenelender Archmage, and counter target non-creature spell. The interesting part about this, because we kind of haven't talked about this aspect of the card yet, but I think it is quite good, is the fact that blue mana is mana of any color because of what Agatha does with that top paragraph.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
Which is easy to miss, and I think there might be some commanders out there who have colored costs in their activated ability that Agatha's Soul Cauldron is good just for that part and the graveyard hate. And you might incidentally do some cool stuff with an activated ability, but you're really just like, I like the graveyard hate. I like that the fact that my commander's activated ability is generic colored mana now, basically. And the upside of like, I'll find some spots to put a +1/+1 counter and maybe steal an ability or something, but that's not even the main reason it's in there. That's how good the card is, I think, because the other pieces can still add up without the sort of main piece and still be good.
And all of the cards that we're talking about today, these are not like crazy build-arounds. These are format staples, right? Like Dex Havseeker, Tri-Builder, and Glenelender Archmage, and Ranger Captain of Eos. Like these are just in decks.
And so this artifact's 2 mana. That's what I love about it. You will find a spot to cast it. You don't stick your neck out very far to cast the card. So, and it also has like crazy combo potential, right?
Yeah.
Like we just talked about sort of the most modest scenarios, right? Like the things we talked about are likely to just come up.
Yeah. If you have like 3 creatures with a +1/+1 counter on it and a thing in the graveyard, this could happen. Yeah, but we're not talking about the infinite combos.
Yeah. Let's talk about combos here because it can do a lot.
So the big card that everybody's talking about with this, with the Soul Cauldron is Grist the Hunger Tide, which of course is a planeswalker, but it is a creature anywhere else but the battlefield. So Agatha Soul Cauldron can exile Grist from the graveyard and give all of your creatures with +1/+1 counters on it the planeswalker abilities that Grist has.
Right.
And Grist has an ability that says +1, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, then mill a card. If it's an insect, then you repeat the process.
By the way, milling cards good with Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Also good. Yeah. So now all of your creatures have this ability, but now you're making more creatures when you're activating these abilities. So if you have a way to put a +1/+1 counter on the bug that you create with the activation, now you have infinite Grists and infinite bugs.
Yeah, if you have like a Cathar's Crusade, let's say, I think that's what comes to mind for me, right? And you exile Grist under Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and you have even 2 creatures with +1/+1 counters.
Yeah.
So those 2 have Grist ability. You do one, and then you do the second one, and the first one gets a counter, plus the other ones get counters, I know.
Yeah.
And then
Cathar's Crusade.
Remember, planeswalkers don't care about summoning sickness.
No.
So it's like, oh, cool, that new one you just made, you make a creature. You +1, and then you +1. I think you have to worry about milling out at that point, but you can have as many of those.
I mean, you activate as many as you're comfortable. You can make 40 bugs. You can make 6 bugs. You can make, you got 99 cards. What are you worried about?
Right. And as you're milling, one of those is going to be anger.
Yeah, right. That's the thing is this deck gets really crazy when you have haste. And one of the best cards to do this is a little common from Strixhaven. It is First Day of Class. 1 in a red for an instant. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains haste until end of turn.
It does both things.
Now it's both the things.
Wow.
Anytime a creature enters, it gets a counter and has haste. You can imagine this goes infinite with a lot of things, starting with Krenko Mob Boss.
Oh, boy.
Krenko has an activated ability that says, tap, create X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, where X is the number of goblins you control. So as long as you control at least one goblin on the battlefield,
then you
make
exile this under
goblin.
Agatha,
Yeah.
and then tap one of them, make goblin, has +1/+1 counter and haste. Tap that one, make 2.
Yeah.
Plus, once you're done, once you go up the chain and you're like, on this tap, I actually get 1,248 goblins.
and they're 2/2s with
And
haste.
they're 2/2s. And this time I'll attack. I'm not going to tap them as if they're Krenko.
I could make more, but I'm not just.
Right.
I'm not going to waste your time.
Said no Magic player ever.
I mean, this even goes infinite with like Threeben Doomsayer, which just says tap, create a 1/1 white human creature token. If they have haste and they have counters on them, you can keep making humans.
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with Walking Ballista Triskelion. Congratulations, we broke these cards.
So I wanted to talk about these because I don't know of specifically any infinite combos that you can do with these, but in a +1/+1 counter deck, and you just have let's say you have 4 creatures and they have 6 +1 counters on each of them. That's a fairly reasonable board state for a dedicated +1/+1 counter deck. Now you get Walking Ballista in the graveyard. An easy thing to do. You cast it for 0.
Yeah.
You exile the Walking Ballista. Now all of your creatures are Walking Ballistas. You now represent 4 times 6 damage? Just 24 damage.
Just boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Sure.
Just immediately right now. And there's nothing they can really do about it other than remove these creatures at instant speed.
At split second speed, really?
Yeah. It's I
guess remove it in response to you targeting
until you
the Ballista with the Soul Cauldron.
Yeah.
They would have to have it ready right
or
now. That's the thing with the Soul Cauldron, because it's 2 mana, so you can even hold it and cast it, and it's really hard for them to have seen it coming.
Yeah.
And
it happens right now. It doesn't have Summoning Sickness. So just having creatures with a lot of +1/+1 counters on it start to go pretty infinite when you have stuff like Triskelion, which says remove a counter, deal 1 damage, or Sage of Hours,
Yep.
which says remove all +1/+1 counters from Sage of Hours or this card.
From this card, yep.
For each 5 counters removed this way, take an extra turn after this one. Now, this is sort of famously an infinite combo piece.
So this could turn all your creatures into Sage of Hours, and if they already have counters, you don't even have to go infinite. Generally, 3 turns will do it. So,
If you have some way to repeatedly put counters on stuff.
Well, and if you've got 4 Sage of Hours out and you get 3 extra turns, it ain't going to be hard to win.
You can figure it out from there, right?
You're going to get 10 more extra turns or probably infinite,
Yeah, if you have 4 extra turns and you can't win the game, you need to reconsider your deck.
So I had a question about, Agatha Soul Cauldron overall.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this card is more likely to go in decks that are themed around activated abilities, or more likely to go in decks that are themed around +1/+1 counters?
I mean, both. Is that crazy? It feels... In activated abilities, you're probably running a tapping deck. You're probably running a lot of activated abilities have haste.
Yeah.
And
there are more activated abilities than people think, too, because
Right.
there's a lot of these that don't require tapping. They require some amount of mana, but they count.
Right. And it just immediately makes everything more flexible. It makes the appeal, you and I both play activated ability decks.
Yeah, I love
you
it.
like Pinger decks. I have Feldergriff decks. I built a Kenrith deck.
Yeah.
I love those. The appeal of them is you get to wait and do what is the most effective in the right moment. It's all instant speed, basically. And now all of your creatures have 3 or 4 options, plus the options on the battlefield. That just gives you so many lines.
Yeah, my thinking with +1/+1 counter decks is it might even be more powerful and more explosive, and your play pattern might differ, where you get the Soul Cauldron and you wait till you have a bunch of creatures with 1/1 counters on them, and you look for a spot where you're like, even if you just go play it, exile your mana dork. Now, it basically was a Cryptolith right now, but tap all my creatures for mana and do more than you thought I could. But it might be sometimes you know, I can get this card in the graveyard. You don't know I've even got Agatha's Soulcaller in my deck. And then, you know, it looks a little scary over there. You got 5 creatures with 1 encounters, but then you're like, boom, do that, exile this, and win now, you know, type of thing. Because the 1/1 counter deck will have a better chance to turn 5 or 6 things all at once into that creature, whereas I think the activated ability deck will be able to choose its activated abilities, but probably only getting the 1/1 counters from the Soul Cauldron.
Right.
Means only turning one thing
Limits
into.
it a
Yeah,
little
so
bit,
I was just thinking about that. It was interesting. Either way, this card is like really cool and really nuts. And what I love about it is it's one of those cards that when you're playing it, because of your other 3 opponents, will present to you all kinds of situations all the time that you've just never been in, right?
Like, oh, good. You played your Mindless Automaton?
Yeah.
That seems good right now.
Yeah. Whatever colors I'm in, I could never have this combination, but
Yeah.
you played that card and I exiled it, so now I get to do this thing. Yeah.
It seems it's a value piece in activated ability decks, and it's a win condition in +1/+1 counter decks, is sort of my estimation of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
It could be a combo piece in activated ability decks too. Yeah, really, really powerful. I think this is the kind of card that we're just going to keep seeing more and more combos where you're like, yeah, you can win the game in this way. Or maybe, oh, wait, this way.
Yeah. Yep. It's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Okay. The next card is very interesting. It's sort of the it's the main character in the set, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the
We get
main
one
characters,
Planeswalker per set now, and this is it?
Yeah.
It's Ashiok, Wicked Manipulator. Can we show the cool Dark Pack cosplays Ashiok because it is so good?
Yeah.
Okay, then we should probably show the card. 3 black for a Planeswalker. Ashiok has 5 loyalty. If you would pay life while your library has at least that many cards in it, exile that many cards from the top of your library instead. So it's Bolas' Citadel-esque, but instead of the life...
You pay cards.
Yeah, so you're paying cards for mana.
Yeah.
All right. +1 ability. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Exile one of them and put the other into your hand. -2. Create 2 1/1 Black Nightmare creature tokens with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if a card was put into exile this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So they're 2/2s if you've paid life and cast a card that way or something like that. Yeah. And then the ultimate -7. Target player exiles the top X cards of their library, where X is the total mana value of the cards you own in exile. So if you have done that sort of static ability enough, then likely you just mill them out when you ultimate. Again, Ashiok comes in with 5 loyalties, so has to +1 twice. So max, minimum 3 turns with no help.
So
so ultimate's unlikely to happen very often, but it's there. I mean... The most interesting part about this card obviously is the pay cards instead of life part, right?
Yeah, I think like we've seen a lot in Planeswalkers in Commander is if it doesn't, like the static ability is a reason that makes Planeswalkers popular, right? Liliana Dreadhorde General, Narset, these are some of the more popular Planeswalkers.
Yeah, other Ashiok.
Yeah, other Ashiok is
no tutor Ashiok.
Broken. A powerful static ability makes a Planeswalker sort of win a spot in a Commander deck. Yeah. So I think a lot of it really rides on this being a good thing. And we pay a lot of life. We have a lot of life, so we have a lot of life to pay.
It is the cheating of a cost, which tends to be breakable.
For sure.
Yeah.
I did want to mention with this card, you cannot pay more life than life you have because this is a replacement effect.
Yeah.
So a lot of if you have 60 cards in your deck but you only have 30 life points, you can't pay 60 because you only have 30 life to pay. So you can pay.
This can matter at the end of the game when you're down to 3 life and you want to pay 4 to do to cast something kind of or do something and you're like, oh, I can't.
Yeah.
Even though with the replacement I would live. But the game says no, you just can't initiate that. Yeah.
Right. Because this says if you would pay life. And if you can't, then you wouldn't. If that makes sense.
If you can't, then you wouldn't. And you shouldn't.
Let's talk about some pay life cards that see a lot of play in Commander. I wanted to just talk about how this works with the card. Yeah. Starting with something that's fairly straightforward.
This is an underrated card.
I love this card.
Yeah, it's very good. It's Fire Covenant. It's 1 black and a red for an instant. It says, Fire Covenant deals X damage divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is equal to the amount of life you pay. Effects that prevent or redirect cannot be used to counter this loss of life. They don't have that last thing anymore because paying life just has that on it. So
it's errata to say,
and you say, I'm going to pay 15 life and this 3 mana, and I'm going to do 5 damage there, 4 damage there, 3 damage there, and I lost track of the math, and 3 damage somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it adds to 15.
It did, though. I got there.
Yeah, did you? Good job. I wasn't counting.
I was like, oh, crap. Why did I just say 555?
15 so high. Oh,
Yeah.
no.
So in this case, you would pay the 3 mana and say, I'm going to pay 20 life.
Yep.
And then Ashiok would be like, cool, you're going to exile 20 cards off the top of your library, and you're going to deal the 20 damage how you want.
Yeah, that is an additional cost.
Yep.
So that is something that would be put like even before the spell resolves. You would exile 20 cards and then the spell would resolve. Seems really, really powerful when you're not worried about how much life you're paying.
Yeah. And you end most games with 50 plus cards in your library. So that 20 cards, obviously there's people react to a million different ways, but unless you've got certain combo pieces, it's just as likely to bring your best card to the surface as it is to mill it away. And for most, it's kind of a wash usually. So yeah, it's like, would I pay a resource that doesn't matter instead of 20 life? Yes, I would, please. Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one. I wasn't sure. Once you talk it through, it makes sense. But Necropotence is a card that sees a lot of play. It says skip your draw step. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. But then it says pay 1 life. Exile the top card of your library face down. Put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. So you can sort of pay 1 life for a card. You get that card sort of delayed. How does this work with Ashiok, though? Because I'm drawing cards and I'm exiling cards off my library. How does the timing work?
I've asked multiple people in the office and was like, you're sure? Okay.
Can we name those people so that if we're wrong, it's their fault and not ours?
Yeah, Murph and Jamie. Actually, this one might have just been Jamie. Pay 1 life is the cost, which will be replaced by Ashiok. So the first thing that you do if you pay 1 life is that you exile a card to pay it, and then you exile the next card, and that one's in a separate exile pile.
That you'll put into your hand.
That you'll put into your hand later.
But it's the second card then.
It's the second card. So you exile first to pay, exile second to draw.
So you have an Ashiok exile and a Necropotence exile. And the Ashiok ones are going to stay there, and the Necropotence go into your hand.
Yes.
Okay, so so I want to draw 5 cards. I do them one at a time, though.
Yes.
So I go Ashiok exile, Necropotence exile, Ashiok exile, Necropotence exile 5 times?
Yes.
Oh my God.
You end up exiling 10 cards. This works particularly well with Ashiok's -7, though, because it cares about all of the cards in exile. Necropotence says when you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard instead. So you can't, so it works with those exiled cards as well.
Oh, so you're like, draw 30. Oh, sorry, I have to discard 23. But of course, you're in your end step. You can't activate Ashiok yet.
But it's but you can exile all of your deck either to like pay or draw -7.
Okay.
And then
I mean, Necropotence is already good, so this is just making it better.
Yeah, this is also 8 mana worth of permanence that you have to have.
And you have to be at ultimate range to even do the ultimate part. Okay.
So this is like fairly, Magic Christmas Land type of place. But
okay. Let's go to the next card that sees a lot of play that says pay life on it, which is Bolas's Citadel.
This is the one everybody was talking about when this card came out. And it is a real brain teaser.
Yeah, it makes my head hurt just thinking about it. So this is an artifact you can look at the top card of your library at any time, and then you can play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell that way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. It also has an activated ability that doesn't matter here. How does this work exactly with Ashiok out?
Yeah, because
let's say I have a force CMC spell on top.
Okay, so the way that you do it is you put that spell onto the stack.
Yeah.
And then you pay the costs. So this spell goes onto the stack. It's not
on top of my library anymore.
It's not on top of your library anymore. Then you exile the next 4 cards. There's no opportunity to do like a Bolas's Citadel thing where you're like, oh, I want that instant actually before I exile it. You just pay those 4 are gone.
So you say, I'm going to pay this cost, and then you do it. You can't like pause it.
Nope, that's it. You're like, the spell is on the stack. You must pay the cost. But you do exile all of the cards face up.
Okay.
So it's a little less complicated than it sounds because you're like, well, I'm casting the spell on top of my library. Do I immediately exile it? You're like, it's not on top of your library once you put it onto the stack.
And then Ashiok is not a May.
No.
So if you ever got both of these out, you have to do the exile thing. You can't be like, no, I'd rather just pay the life.
It says if you would pay life while your library has at least that many cards in it. So if you get to a point where you're like, I'm trying to cast a 13 drop and I only have 12 cards in my library.
Now I can pay life.
Now you can pay 13. As long as you have 13.
So it won't force you to mill totally out.
No.
Okay.
You have to have that many cards. It won't let you deck yourself unless it's like you're paying one and
Unless
you have
you
one
get to
card
an
less.
Exast,
Unless you
yeah.
get Exaxes,
Okay.
which is tricky. The other card that we need to talk about here.
Again, I'll sees a lot of play in this Post Malone's like favorite card. I've died to it a lot.
Yeah.
Kirik, son of Yawgmoth. Oh, how's this even work? Okay, so it's 4 and 3 Phyrexian black mana just to cast it. So that one's easy, right? Because when I cast it, I just exile 6 cards and pay the 4. Okay, but it says for each black in a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. So that you just do it just like you like. This is not as confusing, but it's a Citadel to me because the spell's still coming from my hand presumably most of the time.
Right. This card works very well. The interesting thing about Kirik is you're like, I'm going to slam Ashiok into this deck. Kirik's also a combo deck.
Yeah. You don't want to exile
so you
important
have
pieces.
to be careful, and you often can't see the top card of your library. So as risky as Kirik is, Ashiok is also very risky in a different way, because if you miss if you exile your Aetherflux Reservoir,
You might not be able to win.
you need a new plan. So you do have to be
Yeah, you're actually
really
going to try and
careful.
bullet the Citadel since his top Aetherflux, probably. That's what you're trying to do, right?
It feels like you're not going to do the Ashiok thing until you have your combo pieces in your hand. And then you can slam Ashiok and do what you will, and then use your library entirely as a resource. But
It's kind of like a ritual or a mana provider that you don't deploy until you're going off.
Right.
That's what Ashiok would be in a Kirik deck, probably.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, in Commander, we have more cards than normal. We have more life than normal. And we use paying life fairly regularly. That's
Right.
a huge part of Commander. But is exiling cards from your library, is that better than paying life?
I feel like it's not, if I think about it, looking at Ashiok, as cool as it is,
Yeah.
would I play that instead of Bolas's Citadel? And I don't think so. I think Citadel. But Citadel also allows you to play cards from the top of your library. Ashiok doesn't have that part of it.
Right. It draws some cards and makes some guys.
Yeah.
But it's here for the static ability, and the static ability is pretty hard to take advantage of, especially when in a pay life deck that tends to be fairly turbo, just designed regularly, and tends to be digging for some specific tool.
I have a pay life deck, but it's Greven.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want Ashiok in there because then I don't pay the life and I don't get the bonus
Right.
from Greven, right? So that doesn't go there. The Kirik is a pay life deck, which I think it does go in there, but you sort of deploy it at a certain time. You don't just play it for value at some point. Is there a deck that just plays it for value at some point? And it feels like I'm not sure there is.
Yeah, unless you have a specifically from exile, cares about the number of cards you have exiled, it may go in that kind of deck, but that's very niche.
Yeah.
So I think the more I looked at Ashiok and the cards that it went with, I'm like, yeah, this is good and something's happening. But at the end of the day, I don't really know if that's easier than just paying 20 life. Is exiling 20 cards better than paying 20 life in Commander?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It definitely depends on the deck.
It feels like it should be, because it feels like paying 20 life gets you closer to losing more than paying 20 cards gets you closer to losing.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you start to sort of think through it, it's like, man, those 20 cards being exiled does have a cost, because there are important cards in decks. Even if you're not a combo deck, there's still important cards in decks. And going to graveyard you can get them back, but going to exile for the most part, you can't.
Yeah.
You can put some cards in that maybe would allow you to. I don't know that having one Ashiok in your deck makes it worth it to play cards that care about exile, though. So, yeah. It's interesting. I think the card's powerful, but you're right. It just seems very narrow. All right, let's go on to the next one. We're going to have to speed up for the next one. This is going to be a 17-hour-long episode.
It's a real... Well, those are two of the big ones. This one's kind of a goober. It's Asinine Antics. 2 blue for a sorcery. You may cast Asinine Antics as though it had flash if you pay 2 more to cast it. So 4 for sorcery speed, 6 for instant. For each creature your opponents control, create a cursed roll token attached to that creature. A reminder for cursed rolls is enchanted creature is a 1/1. It doesn't get rid of their abilities. It just makes it small.
So all your opponent's creatures become 1/1s.
Base power 1/1.
They have abilities still.
Yep.
And they can still be modified by +1/+1 counters and things like that. Mm-hmm. But they are 1/1s.
They are little.
How good is that?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Me neither.
Base power 1/1. Commander tends to win with a lot of 1/1s that have been made big.
Yeah.
Is like tokens. That's sort of how it does that. Or
Right. This is probably bad against tokens.
Yeah, this doesn't do anything against tokens other than make a ton of things.
Yeah, maybe take like
which
5
we can
power
talk
off the
about
board.
in a second. But like, if somebody's attacking you with like 3 things, which doesn't often happen in Commander unless those 3 things are huge. And you cast this, you're like, they're 1/1s. I can block one of them and kill it. You're like, it's like a combat trick.
And it has some staying power in that, like, those things are still 1/1s after that. They hit you for a lot less. Like, it's good. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Is it 6 mana good?
yeah, that's what I mean. When I say good, I mean, it did things that are things you would want to happen, but I don't know if it warrants the spot in the deck. It's just interesting. So the fog, we put fog. It's not really a fog, but
It's like a combat trick, it feels like.
Yeah, the trick portion or the board wipe portion of it is maybe
Yeah.
the less powerful part about it.
Yeah. The thing that I think you would play Asinine Antics over any number of like bounce wipes or something is you're making a ton of things.
Right. This is however many creatures your opponents control. It's that many enchantment auras entering the battlefield, that many tokens entering the battlefield under your control. They're attached to their creatures. They're still things that are your permanents.
Yeah. And for 4 mana, make like comfortably 10 things.
Yeah, even if
That
it was
you can do a lot with.
Yeah, even if it was just like make scrap or make like they literally have an artifact that does nothing except is an artifact that enters. And this could be considered make 12 enchantments.
Things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, there's a lot of stuff in Commander that just cares about a lot of stuff. Starting with like Altar of the Brood. It's whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. If you make 20 enchantment tokens, you mill your opponents for 20. Like that's a huge chunk of their library. A little dangerous unless you have a plan to recast Asinine Antics.
Right.
But
still, there's some upside there.
But that is a lot of stuff coming in.
I like this next one, Kodama of the East Tree. Remember, I played a Togo deck with this, and it's the same theory with the rocks coming in, which is whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So the tokens are 0 CMC, but lands are also 0 CMC. So you could cast this and be like, that's 12 things that came on, and however many lands I got, I can put those on the battlefield now, which is very powerful. And if you had any 0 CMC stuff, you could do that too.
Yeah. You're in Simic at that point. We know you have a lot of cards in hand, so you can dump 3 lands into play. Easy peasy.
I like this next one a lot.
Essex Fractal Bloom. We've been talking about Essex a lot. It says, the first time you would create 1 or more tokens during each of your turns, you may instead choose a creature other than Essex and create that many tokens that are copies of that creature. So now you're making 10 tokens.
All at once. And you're like, never mind, I don't care about curses at all. I'm going to make 10 copies of this other creature I've got.
Of your thing or my thing.
Pretty
or
cool.
that. Like, that's a huge swing for 4 mana. You can make a lot of tokens.
Yeah, I like that. Another one is Junkwinder. It's 5 blue for a 5/6 serpent, but has affinity for tokens. So it's often just blue. Whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control, tap target non-land permanent opponent controls. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step.
And they're not going to untap for 2 turns.
Yeah.
The biggest, splashiest one, of course, is Mirkwood Bats. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Now you drain the table for the number of creatures your opponents control.
That's brutal.
And
it's a Rakdos Charm a little bit.
Now we get into the splashy thing. You are making a lot of tokens. You're making a lot of things, but specifically those things are enchantments.
Yeah, so all the enchantresses that care about entering the battlefield, not the ones where you cast. So Eidolon of Blossom, Setessan Champion are kind of the 2 best ones.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of obvious, and any enchantment deck that has blue probably runs this card for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, you make 10 tokens, you draw 10 cards for 4 mana.
And you still turn their stuff into 1/1s.
And now your Sanctum Weaver taps for
That's a very good
11.
6 mana spent. That's a very
really
good 6 mana spent.
And it's 4 mana at sorcery speed.
True, yeah.
You don't even have to do it at instant speed
That's
at that
a good point. And it works with Archon of Sun's Grace as well. So then now you're like, oh, never mind. I'm going to make 20 2/2 flyers as well.
They have lifelink.
Yeah.
By the way. There's also cards that care about auras entering the battlefield. These are auras from Wilds of Eldraine. Tanglespan Lookout says, whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Classic. If you care about enchantments, I think that you're just going to look at this card.
Yeah.
Everything else, you look a little closer. I think like Essex decks, if you care about making tokens, then that's what you're doing.
Yeah, 100% it goes in Essex decks, I think. It's just too big. Like, that'll win you the game. The fact that on the card it says, make 10 copies of this creature, that's a game-winning play again. Yeah.
But the best thing I did with Essex is I made like 12 copies of an Ayara, and they all saw each other enter, and then they all died. It was like 114 damage. You were like, woo.
That's pretty cool.
That was fun.
All right, the next one's getting a lot of chatter out there. Mm-hmm. It's called Beseech the Mirror. It has Beseech, and I want it to have hybrid mana, but it doesn't. It's black, and 1. So 4 mana total for a sorcery. It has Bargain. You may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. Search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If this spell was bargained, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost if that spell's mana value is 4 or less. Put the exiled card into your hand if it wasn't cast this way, which means if you don't bargain it, it's a 4 mana tutor, diabolic tutor. It's not good.
Yeah.
But if you do bargain it, then it puts the thing, it plays the thing, it casts the thing only if it's 4 CMC or less. Again, bargain is sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell.
Yeah, I mean, tutors are good. Diabolic tutor, not particularly good. That's the 4 mana demonic tutor.
I'd say it's outright bad at this point. There's been so many tutors that there's almost no reason to ever play diabolic, but yeah.
Yeah, you could draw it for cheaper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we look at Beseech the Mirror and we're like, it's not better than demonic tutor, it's not better than vampiric tutor.
Right.
Just sort of off the bat. But the real comparisons here are these sort of fringe, the 3rd and 4th tutors that people tend to play. Right. So like a Grim tutor, which is 3 mana and you lose 2 life, and Diabolic Intent, which you sacrifice a creature and you can go get it, and that's only for 2 mana.
Right. And where does it stand? Well, by Diabolic Intent is very similar in that I do have to sacrifice something. Mm-hmm. The question here is the fact that you get a full rebate on the mana if you get a 4-drop. And also you have to think, like, how often am I getting a 4-drop? Am I often getting something like Bolas of Citadel that costs too much mana to cast for free off Beseech the Mirror anyway? But in those situations where you're not, it's definitely better to sacrifice something, go get your Smothering Tithe and cast it, or your Dockside even. But Dockside and Diabolic Intent would basically be the same, right? It's still 4 mana that you paid and you put it into play.
Yeah, and one's black, which is not nothing. If you have Dockside, it's not a problem, but definitely harder to splash.
Well, yeah, you'd have to go get Dockside though, so you wouldn't already have it. So black might be hard. I mean. Yeah.
So there's definitely some upsides to it, but it feels like it's a very weird thing, like, because you still cast the thing. It's not like you get a secret. Like, they could still counter the spell that you find.
Sure,
if you go find an Aetherflux Reservoir, they'll see the Aetherflux Reservoir and be like, no, I can counter that. It doesn't put it into play. If you sacrifice the thing and it put it directly on the battlefield, whoa, that's broken. Wild. Yeah. But this one feels a little bit more fair than that, as long as you have like stuff to sack. And that's the big difference for me, is like if you have treasures reliably, if you have tokens reliably, then this card, and also you play 3 tutors.
Yeah, and also we should say Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor are not cheap cards.
No, that's true.
So not everybody can just I've got like 25 decks. I can't afford to put a Demonic Tutor in all of them.
Yeah.
I played in the old days when they came in revised packs, and I have quite a few, but by the 6th or 7th black deck, I don't have Demonic Tutors in those.
Which is fair.
Yeah. So I think, for everybody, it's not just like, is it the 3rd tutor?
Yeah.
It's the Diabolic Intent, I think, is actually the most interesting comparison, because I think you can't play Beseech the Mirror unless you can bargain it.
Right.
Because otherwise it's just Diabolic Tutor. So you have to have like an 80-90% hit rate. Like, I have a lot of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens, probably going to be artifacts or tokens, that I even want to sacrifice in my deck. Like, it is about sacrificing things or having expendable things. And then the question is this better than Diabolic Intent often enough, or do you just run both in those decks? Because they're very similar.
Right.
And Diabolic Intent feels a little better a lot better when you go get something that's 5 CMC or more.
Yeah, of course.
And it could be the same when you get 2 CMC or 1 CMC.
Or, yeah.
It can even be better if you get 1 CMC. But so if you're getting 3 or 4 specifically, is the only time it's going to be better.
It's going to be better than Diabolic
That's interesting.
Yeah. Unless you're sacrificing, like, Diabolic Intent does specify a creature. So if you're sacrificing like treasures or clues or something like that, then
curses.
Yeah, maybe there's upsides to Beseech the Mirror.
Food, yeah.
But and you're like, I've got more like artifact scrap lying around.
That's fair, actually. It is easier to sacrifice to the bargain than it is to Diabolic Intent.
Yeah, sacking a full creature isn't something that every deck can handle.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
You do have a deck that has Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, and you only want a third tutor. It meets the criteria. It's going to have enough tokens.
Yeah.
But they're creature tokens mostly. Is it Diabolic Intent or Beseech the Mirror, you think, as your third tutor?
I like Diabolic Intent because it just leaves me a little bit more flexible. Like if I play Beseech the Mirror, I really do want something 4 CMC or less, and probably something like 4
to get full value.
To feel like I really spent it well. So if I'm playing Beseech the Mirror, I feel like I have very specific targets that I'm looking for, and it's 3 or 4 CMC. But Diabolic Intent leaves me a little bit more flexible to be like, I'm going to go find my swords and I'm going to cast it when I want to.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point I didn't think about, which is with Beseech the Mirror, you have to cast the thing you tutor for now. So you're not so much grabbing something and setting up for a later turn, a combo piece, or, some sort of game we can play, even just like a board wipe, but I'm not going to deploy it right now, but I see that I will need this Toxic Deluge probably in a turn or two, and I'm just going to be efficient with my mana, go get it now. You can't really do that with Beseech the Mirror. It should be a card that you actively need to put on the battlefield right now. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like a second copy of a win con. It's a second Aetherflux Reservoir, and you're casting it when you would cast the Aetherflux Reservoir rather than a toolboxy tutor, which is how I prefer to run tutors.
Yeah. The more we talk about it, the worse it's getting for me.
Yeah, it's tough. I think there are some narrow places where it's better, like in a Keurig deck where you can play the mana for all of those pips. Now it's 1 colorless mana to cast this spell, and you cast the spell for free. Prosper, you are casting the spell from exile, so you get a treasure back from something like that cares about you casting it from exile.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. You said you could go get Delayed Blast Fireball with it.
That card's just awesome.
And you're casting it from exile. That's okay. Yeah. That's your board wipe.
Yeah. So then you pay 4 black mana and you deal 5 damage to all of their creatures and their faces.
Yeah.
Seems pretty good. So if you care about casting stuff from exile specifically, then this card, the synergy gets pushed over the top for me. The cutest trick that I like with this is that you can cast suspend cards if you bargain it.
Right.
Like you can go find a Wheel of Fate, which is a suspend Wheel of Fortune, and just cast it right away for 1 black.
You don't have to suspend it. In fact, you couldn't suspend it if you wanted to.
You just cast it right now. The most messed up one is, of course, Restore Balance, which means you can
it's balance.
Cast balance for 4 black mana.
I used to have a balance deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Zern Orbs, so I could sack all my lands in response to putting it on the stack.
Balance is so sick. I hate it shouldn't be legal in Commander.
Oh no.
But it's so sick.
No good comes of playing that card. It's so good though.
It's so fun. All right. Let's talk about this next one. It is one of the courts in the cycle. It is Court of Vantress, 2 blue for an enchantment. When the court enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose up to 1 other target enchantment or artifact. If you are the monarch, you may create a token that's a copy of it. If you're not the monarch, you may have Court of Vantress become a copy of it, except it has this ability.
A little confusing, but it's a clone basically for artifacts and enchantments. But if you're the monarch, the upside is it will make a new clone of it every turn, right? So if you're not the monarch, it just turns into a thing and you have one of that thing. If you are the monarch and you can become them and you can hold the monarch a couple turns in a row, you can be like, I make a copy of that. I make another copy of that. Oh, now I copy that thing. And those copies stick around.
Yeah, there's been cards that are similar to this. It reminds me of Estrid's Invocation, which is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, it enters as a copy, and then at your upkeep, you can blink out Estrid and make it a copy of something else.
Progenitor Mimic is a little bit similar.
Yeah, it's just stuff that sort of lets you reset depending on what's on the board.
Yeah, it's like it's making photocopies.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this card only beats similar cards like Mirror Maid or Clever Impersonator, which can copy artifacts and enchantments, if you can defend the monarch, which is tough because you just cast a 4 mana enchantment.
Yeah. And the 4 mana enchantment, we should say, does not become a copy of something or copy something until your next upkeep.
Yeah.
So you're like, 4 mana, 4 CMC, I become the monarch, go. It didn't create a defender. There's no extra blocker there. It will give you something, presumably on your upkeep, but for now, and all your opponent's turns, while they can attack you and try to steal the monarch, and they do because they want to draw that card. Yeah, I don't like this card. I think it's bad.
It's cool. And it feels like if you're making tokens, but also can defend the monarch, then this is sweet because now you can start making like multiple copies if you have anointed processions or that kind of thing. Then it becomes awesome. Mm-hmm. Slow, but awesome. But that's a tricky deck to like find, because now you're making tokens, probably flying tokens, so you can actively defend the Monarch. Then you care about making copies of, what might just be a Signet, depending on your playgroup and the board state.
Probably going to do better than that. Yeah,
Probably.
It also can't copy creatures. It's enchantments and artifacts. And
Yes.
I think that narrowness is actually one of the reasons I don't like it that much. If it could copy creatures at the very least, this is going to get you something that's pretty good. There's often just early in the game not a good enough enchantment or artifact that, like you said, it's probably going to be a Signet early, right? But if you play this late, there's not enough turns left in the game to make enough photocopies of stuff for it to really be worth it. If you make two tokens, you're pretty happy because you spent 4 mana, but that's over the course of 2 turns.
Yeah.
And then it's like
3 turns almost.
Sort of Phantasmal Image, I would say. Like it's probably on that level, which is a good card. But Phyrexian Metamorph only costs 3 mana.
Yeah.
I would just play that.
It'll get you either an artifact or a creature. Yeah.
It's gonna get what you want, and it's not going to cause people to attack you.
That's the thing. Is these courts, like the white court makes tokens and it sees play because it makes tokens.
It can defend it.
And it like eventually can defend the Monarch and starts making 4/4s, which are real. But this kind of thing, like the red court, not from this set, the first one, Court of Red. Ire? That sounds right. That deals 7 damage if you're the Monarch. You get attacked straight up.
They're like, we're
nobody's
never
gonna
letting you
allow
have
you
that.
to do that. So, and this one does feel like that level of dangerous.
Yeah.
So, probably not going to see a ton of play, but it is neat.
It's interesting. Oh, I like this next card a lot.
Yes, you do.
This is Decadent Dragon. 2 red for a 4/4 dragon with flying trample. It says whenever Decadent Dragon attacks, create a treasure token. But it has an adventure side, so you can cast it for its adventure cost, and it's an instant. It's called Expensive Taste. It says exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So if you don't know how adventures work, you can cast the adventure side. It'll resolve. You'll get the effect. Adventures. The card goes into exile, and then you can cast the other side, the non-adventure side, for its mana cost at any other time, obeying timing restrictions. Right. So the normal play pattern will be play the adventure, do the 2 impulse draw off your opponent's library, and then cast the dragon side later. A couple things to note about this adventure side, right? I impulsive draw off Rachel's deck. It says you may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. It does not say anything about mana of any color.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit tough because luckily the dragon makes treasures, which can
you
give
haven't
you the
made
colors.
any treasures yet, though.
It does say play, so if one of them's a land, I might be able to get like one of the colors I don't have, and therefore help me cast the other card, whatever it is. I think it's not going to be too hard to get the 2 cards of value off of it.
Yeah. It's something worth noting for this. The adventure spell is black. The dragon is red. So it is a Rakdos card. It is both red and black in its color identity. So this can only go in red and black plus decks. But yeah, I mean, you're getting 2 cards off the top of their library, but you're doing it at instant speed.
That's huge.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Like this means that there's like some really narrow situations where this just gets somebody in a huge way.
The Vampiric Tutor, let's say.
Oh no. Any of those top of library tutors that see like a lot of play.
Yep.
Oh,
Enlightened Tutor or Worldly Tutor. Oh.
Where they're playing with an Oracle of Moldiah and the top of their library is revealed, and you're like, yep, actually, I want that one. Give me that one.
Yep.
That sees a ton of play in Commander. There are very weird scenarios where you're like, oh, you only have 2 cards left in your library, and you're almost there. Those are mine.
But the instant speed, I think, is the key to this, because at sorcery, it feels pretty bad at instant.
Yeah.
You can get them, but also, even if you don't get them, you've gotten the maximum amount of information. You can hold up your removal, see if something attacks you. It doesn't. Sweet. On the instep before my turn, I'm going to play the value side of this card. I kept myself safe because if something did come at me, I could remove it. But since I didn't need that, I didn't need to do that. Now I go, boom, cool. Put the 2 cards, impulsively draw them off your deck. Now I have 2 extra cards that I've got access to. And notice it doesn't say until end of turn anywhere on there either. Like impulsive. Yeah. So I don't even know if it is impulsive draw. It's just exile draw.
Yeah, because it's like Ganti.
Yeah, because it's just like you can play them as long as they remain exiled. So you're just going to have access to those cards for the remainder of this game. And it's so efficient because on the other side of this card is a 4/4 flying trample, make a treasure when it attacks dragon, which is just a pretty good card. Like, is it the best card in your deck? No, but are you embarrassed to play a card that does that? No. Yeah.
I honestly, 4 mana, like chunky flyers are great in Commander.
You lose so many games to them, I do.
So many games to them because people are messing around and you're like, you don't have any flyers, and I'm going to keep hitting you with this thing until you figure it out. And it doesn't feel good to remove this.
I think this is almost at exactly like the closest you could be to the line, but not be over it, still be under it, of where I would use removal on it. It's like if it made 2 treasure, gotta kill it.
Yeah.
If it's a 5/5, probably gotta kill it. But it's exactly where it is, where it's like, there's always gonna be something better to kill than that.
Yeah. Which makes it so powerful.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a Goldspan Dragon on the board,
you have
to kill the Goldspan Dragon. But the Decadent Dragon is like, you're just getting a little treat.
Yeah, I can take the 4 and 1 treasure. They're gonna get 1 treasure. Not so bad. Like, I can allow that to exist because I need to save my removal. I can't remove everything in the game. I'm going to save for the stuff that's going to kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so slowly over the course of the game, that thing just makes 4 treasure and deals 16 damage, which is, going to be crazy. And drew you 2 cards already.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like this card. Super efficient.
Really cool. It doesn't feel super like fancy, but it's going to feel really good in game, which is awesome.
You wanted to stop and talk. You wanted to give a PSA. Regarding adventures.
From Rachel Weeks. So in the Toughest to Brew episode, we talked about this a little briefly, but I wanted to explain a little bit further because there's something cool you can do with adventure cards specifically. And if you have something that allows you to cast them from your graveyard, like Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, or the Renin 6 Ultimate, which says you get an emblem with instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have retrace. Lear says instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have flashback. Because those are both static abilities and they check if the card is an instant and sorcery on the stack and not in the graveyard, that means that you can cast adventure spells from your graveyard, and then instead of exiling them like you normally would do on flashback, specifically on resolution, you can send them on an adventure and recast them as a creature. So you can create these kind of adventure loops where you're like, all right, I'm going to cast the adventure spell and I'm going to cast the creature. I'm going to sack the creature and I have Lear on the battlefield. So I'm going to recast the adventure spell and recast the creature. So it lets you sort of keep using these creatures repeatedly for value. And the ruling is sort of hairy. It's definitely one of the most confusing interactions. We had 5 people looking at different stuff online, but it's because it works like Crucible of Worlds, which allows you to play like the backside of MDFCs if they're lands. You can play like a Bala Ged Sanctuary from your graveyard within a Crucible of Worlds because it allows you to play them from your graveyard.
It says play a land, and they're like, is that a land? Yep.
It sure is. That, and it came from your graveyard. That's just fine with me.
Okay, so tell me why Past in Flames does not work.
Past in Flames says each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost.
Okay.
That sounds almost exactly like Lear.
Lear reads, I'm just going to read Lear again.
No, please.
Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. And then Past in Flames, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback.
Past in Flames is looking for instant and it's one word difference.
Yeah.
But Past in Flames is looking for instant and sorcery cards upon its resolution. It looks in your graveyard, sees a couple of creatures, and is like, those aren't instants and sorceries. It doesn't gain flashback. And that's it. But because Lear is a static ability and just says, you have flashback, you have my permission.
It's saying,
it doesn't
when
check.
you cast it, it says, is that an instant or sorcery?
Sure
okay,
is.
yeah, then it does have flashback, actually.
Then you're good.
But Past in Flames doesn't do it in that order. It says, what's an instant and sorcery? Okay, those get flashback.
Yeah.
Weird.
Really, really bizarre, really, really confusing. And Lear also says instant and sorcery cards. So you're like, it's not an instant or sorcery card. It's a creature card in the graveyard, but it's an instant and sorcery on the stack. I wanted to be clear about the ruling because it does work and it is sweet, but it doesn't look like it should work for any reason. So that's a cool thing that you can do.
Okay. Adventure cards. Not complicated at all.
Yeah,
Gonna
right?
get Mutate a run for its money. Okay. Let's go on to the next card. It is called Extraordinary Journey. It's blue XX for an enchantment. Weird casting cost for an enchantment. When Extraordinary Journey enters the battlefield, exile up to X target creatures. For each of those cards, its owner may play it for as long as it remains exiled. Whenever one or more non-token creatures enter the battlefield, if one or more of them enter the entered from exile or was cast from exile, you draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So if I pay 6 mana, I can bounce 2 things, but they are allowed to replay them. And when they do, I will draw a card because they are casting them from exile. I said bounce, but you know what I meant.
It's effectively a bounce spell. It just sort of bounces them into exile rather than bouncing them into their hand.
Right, which could be worse for some of these cards now that care about playing things from exile.
Yeah, I mean, that's
not likely to come up that much.
Yeah, Extraordinary Journey is very bizarre. I mean, we've started to see this kind of effect before. Like Soul Partition is exile and non-land permanent. As long as it's in exile, they can recast it, but it costs 2 more to cast. I like Soul Partition a lot.
I wish this Extraordinary Journey made the cards cost more.
Cost more and it's only creatures and it's at sorcery speed.
It does have this static effect that sits around and will apply to any cards they cast from exile, even if they're not exiled by Extraordinary Journey, correct?
Yes.
So that's got a little upside, I guess. How often does that come up in a game?
So that's the interesting thing, is it does kind of happen a lot. Like Cascade would trigger this.
Oh, interesting.
Adventures, if anybody casts the creature off of an adventure, would trigger this. Impulse Draw, if you're casting a creature from Impulse Draw. It also applies to Blink because it enters the battlefield from exile.
Flicker and Blink. Okay.
Yeah, so you can exile, like if an opponent blinks or if you blink, this is a blue card. It can go in a blue deck. You can draw a card off of that creature entering the battlefield once per turn. Some other weird things are like flip sagas, like Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Flip goes into exile, comes back as a creature.
Interesting.
Battles that have creatures on the backside go into exile, get cast from exile. Doubt the Voidwalker casts a creature from exile.
Okay.
Like this does come up.
It's interesting. It's actually, you're selling money on a little. The Blink is a big deal, actually.
The Blink is huge because most of these effects, like Ghostly Pilferer, Aerial Extortionist, that have had these abilities in the past are only your opponent's creatures. But Extraordinary Journey cares about yours.
And opponents.
Yeah. But it allows you to sort of use this as a like a synergy piece rather than just an interaction piece.
Yeah. That's super interesting, and I think it's a little better than I thought it was when I first looked at it.
It's slow and it's expensive, but honestly, I think casting this for like 4 mana, bouncing 1 thing, and then drawing a card when it comes back, and incidentally getting a little bit of value off of it isn't nothing, especially if you're playing a deck that blinks or battles or flips or, does any of these things.
Most Blink decks will have blue. So casting it for 4. The fact that it does sort of remove a thing justifies the cost a little bit. And the fact that you can maybe later in the game even get rid of multiple things, just kind of reset. Yeah, they're going to be able to come back, but I always think bounce is underrated anyway. Tempo hits are huge when you can sort of get rid of or bounce multiple things. I play a lot of Capsize, for instance. And I win a lot of games off Capsize just because I usually cast it not for its buyback cost, right? Like it is an instant, so it's a little different. But I do think that effect is really good. I didn't really think about the fact that like Blink and I didn't realize so many other effects put things in from exile.
It's very weird. Yeah.
So it's likely to be a card draw engine after the removal part of it is kind of over.
I think if you're running it in your deck, you're running it because you can feed this engine, like specifically in a Blink deck.
Yeah.
I wouldn't run this and rely on your opponents to do it. It's not as flexible as Ghostly Pilferer or Aerial Extortionist, which at least trigger when your opponents cast their commanders. This doesn't care about the command zone. The command zone is not exile. So it's not guaranteed to trigger as much as the other two are.
We have seen this theme of like casting cards from exile, prosper and things like that over the last couple of years. So it could expand into blue and other colors. And the more prevalent it gets, the better this gets. So, because to me, I was looking at it and being like, let's say I pay 6 mana into this.
Yeah.
I bounce 2 things and draw 2 cards. I don't think I would play that card, right?
Yeah.
Like that is just too much mana for that effect. But 4 mana, bounce a thing, draw 4 or 5 cards. It's actually pretty good.
It's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Especially when you're playing against, like, Cascade decks always trigger these things like crazy. And that just shows up, you know? Blink decks will trigger this like crazy. It only triggers once per turn, but every turn probably.
Yeah. If it's your turn, that's pretty good if you basically bounced a thing, got it out there for 4 mana, and you're going to get the 1 card back. They're going to recast that card you bounced.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, at some point. And if they don't, you just straight up remove it.
Now you've removed it.
So yeah, that's pretty good too. And the fact that, if you just have some ways in your deck to get a second, third card off of it. Honestly, 4 mana bounce a thing, draw 3 is probably worth it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sweet.
All right, sold.
It's neat.
All right, I like that. Okay, well, the next card we're going to talk about actually is a pretty important card specifically for MagicCon Vegas. Yeah, that's a pretty good tease. If you want to find out why, well, you're going to have to stick around because we're going to take a quick break and hear a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Run! Run! That thing will devour us all! Nothing can sate the hunger of Yargle, the glutton of Urborg!
Really? Have you tried Factor, America's #1 meal kit?
What? No! There's no time for that now!
I find that hard to believe. It only takes 2 minutes to prepare a fresh, never frozen Factor meal. You even get to skip the grocery store, prep time, and cleanup. Plus, they deliver meals straight to your door.
Are you insane? We've got to keep running!
Keeping healthy, eh? Factor's got you covered with their selection of dietitian-approved calorie-smart meals. Or try their Protein Plus selections if you need that extra boost to support your wellness goals. See, they got something for everyone.
Yargle! He's here! I hunger!
Here you go, Yargs. Try this cheesy bacon ranch shredded chicken. It's got portobellos and garlic broccoli. My favorite.
Yum! Okay, I go now.
Head to factormeals.com/command50 and use code command50 to get 50% off your first box. That's code command50 at factormeals.com/command50 to get 50% off your first box.
Hey, it's Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep. Ever since I opened Kiora's Seafoam Depot, I've been looking to scale up. So I'm always looking for reliable employees who can get cracking right away. And that's why I use Indeed, where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Browsing multiple job sites can be a whale of a time sink, but Indeed's powerful hiring platform puts the fish in efficiency. You're paired with high-quality employees faster than a sea dasher octopus can dash through the sea. And while some resumes on other sites might look fishy, on Indeed you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. That's how I found my star employee, Koma. He does great work. A little too great sometimes.
Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Offer good for a limited time.
Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Just go to Indeed.com/CommandZone and support the show by saying you heard about it on this podcast.
Again, that's Indeed.com/CommandZone. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So, you ready to go back to school?
Wait, I'm done with school. Is this one of those dreams where...
No, not literally. I'm just saying fall is the perfect time to study up on the Commander format with Raycons. Their everyday earbuds let me listen to podcasts like One More Mana and EDH Recast anywhere I want. So whether I'm at the desk or at the gym, I can always be up in my game. Plus, they're only half the price of other premium brands.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my Raycons are great. They're always super comfortable, thanks to the perfect in-ear fit. And with a 32-hour battery life and 8 hours of playtime, I can listen to Crim's MTG Goldfish hot takes while working on podcast outlines all day.
Exactly, and their noise isolation, it lets me tune out all the office chatter.
You know, we are often talking to you, right?
Plus, with one simple tap, I can turn on awareness mode.
Yeah, but do you do that? Do you turn on awareness mode?
Oh, rarely. School's back in session, which means Raycon is having their annual back-to-school sale. For a limited time only, go to buyraycon.com/command today to get 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's buyraycon.com/command to score 20% off. Again, buyraycon.com/command. All right, we are back. We are talking about the cards that go in the 99 from Wilds of Eldraine.
Yeah, and this next one is, it's the theme for a party at MagicCon?
Yeah, so this one is the theme at the Frodo party.
Yeah.
So, all right, it's a little convoluted. If you haven't heard, Elijah Wood will be DJing a party with his DJ partner on Saturday night, which is September 23rd at MagicCon Vegas. And the party is themed after a slumber party. We've been told that you are allowed to wear pajamas to this party. And I don't know what pajamas and Frodo have to do with each other, but it's also, we saw Elijah Wood. I don't know him. I should call him by his last name or his character name. We saw him DJ in Barcelona because he did another party there. And it was pretty cool.
And this one's going to be a little bit sleepier.
He's going to be looking out being like, why is everybody
in pajamas? I don't. All right. And it's because of this card. It's a Faerie slumber party. 4 blue for a sorcery. Return all creatures to their owner's hands. For each opponent who controlled a creature returned this way, you create 2 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying, and this creature can block only creatures with flying.
I like this card.
This is such a rate. If there was a spell that was a 6-mana sorcery that just made 6 1/1 flyers,
pretty good.
That's pretty good. This bounces all the creatures and then gives you a sizable board state afterward.
Yep. The good thing about bounce too, it gets around indestructible.
Yep.
It gets around, all kinds of, pilly little things like recursion.
Yeah.
Sack effects also. Usually they're not going to sack. Maybe they'll sack a thing or two, but like their whole board in response to something like this. Yeah. And the bad thing about board wipes is you're usually like, okay, I have nothing and you all have nothing, and now it's your turn. And they say, well, now I have something and you still have nothing. And then the next person says, I have something also and you still have nothing. But you're like, no, I have 6 1/1 flyers.
And they can only block flyers, which is reasonable. But like 6 bodies in Commander, you could clamp those.
Yep.
You could attack and trigger like a reconnaissance mission or a professional face breaker.
Yep.
Those kind of attack, like we were talking about just a 4/4 flyer. This is 6 damage in the air. Like you could just repeatedly hit somebody for probably 2 turns because they're not going to be able to block 6 after that full board wipe.
Plus, you could be in a token deck, so you could pre-set up the fact that like I cast Divine Visitation the turn before, and now I do this, and now I actually have 6 4/4 flyers.
6 4/4
you have the ability to like make this a little bit better. And then it's just like, hey, I'm in trouble, and the only way I could win this game is reset the board. And yes, I get 6 1/1 flyers, which are going to be useful. So it's just slightly better than like an evacuation or something like that. So
yeah, I don't run a ton of board wipes in Octavia, and I think this is one I'm really going to have to look at because Octavia can turn those 1/1s into 8/8s.
Yeah,
which seems pretty good.
Seems good. Yeah, I actually will play a decent amount of the mass bounce spells. I think they're pretty underrated, and I think this is going to replace, it might be the best one now, besides the Cyclonic Rift, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the blue-black bounce wipes I play, and I play the mono blue one that's one-sided, which is good, but that's only in, for the number of islands you have. And I play there's one that bounces everything except for one permanent, and if you have, one sick permanent, then your commander, then you're great. So there are definitely build-around ones that are really good, but in a token deck, blue did not have a good answer, and this one is a great answer.
Yeah, pretty cool.
All right, we're moving right along to one of the coolest cards in the set. Right?
I like this card a lot, yeah. It's called Gruff Triplets. It is 3 green, so 6 mana for a 3/3 Satyr Warrior, has trample. It says, when Gruff Triplets enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. When Gruff Triplets dies, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. So this comes in, makes 3 3/3s, and if any of them dies, it puts 3 counters on both the 2 that are left. And then if one of those dies, it's now a 6-power creature, it'll put 6 counters on the one that's left. So unless you get rid of them all at once, the amount of power total they've got kind of stays on the board.
Yeah, it gets bigger. Right, you start with 9, you lose 1, then you have 12.
It actually doubles. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you lose that one.
The first time.
Yeah, and then it stays the same on the last one. Yeah, it's for those who didn't get the joke, it's a 3 Billy Goats Gruff.
Yep.
There was a couple of people that I was talking to that they were like, oh. I was like, it's sweet. I mean, this card is such a board in a box, and it's such a little problem if you can expand this ability at all.
And you can expand it in a lot of different ways, I think.
Yeah. You could have a token doubler, like a Parallel Lives. Now you have the 5 Billy Goats Gruff.
Oh my God.
You have the quintuplets.
And then when the first one dies, it puts 12 counters out.
Yeah.
And the second one says, oh, I'm going to put 18 counters out. And then the third one says, I'm going to put, no, it's more than 18. Oh my God. Because it's 9. Oh. It's 18. The math is hard, but I think that if you just do that, and that's the thing about this card. All right, I am going to do the math, right?
Yeah.
You've got 5. They're all 3/3s. One dies, they all become 6 6s.
Yeah.
That one dies, they were 6 6s, and they get
12 12s?
Yeah, they're 12 12s, so that's 36 power. Right?
Yeah.
This one dies, it puts 24 more power out.
They're
24 24s. Yeah. And that's where I think you stop, because that's 48 power, and you'll be at 48 if one of them dies.
And they have trample.
So you got 48 power, and that could happen at instant speed with a sack outlet, right? So you got 5, you go to attack, and if they have 4 blockers, they're dead.
Yeah.
Because it's an Arcbound Ravager's problem where you're like, it doesn't matter which one you block, I will sack everything and put all the counters on the one you didn't. And they have trample, so I guess the blocking doesn't matter too much anyway.
It's also a nightmare to block because you're like, they're 3/3s now, but they're going to sack this one, and then this is going to be a 6/6.
Yeah, I don't even want to kill that, right?
Yeah, you just don't. You rather they stay 3/3s. And then they're like, well,
if you had any sort of pump, then you get to pump the one that's about to die, or, it can become nuts. Yeah, it can become a thing where I'm like, I know we don't play Giant Growths, but that kind of effect.
Yeah.
And then sack it just to get counters on everything. Yeah, I really like it.
It's so wacky. Like, if you have a counter doubler, this becomes a bigger problem.
So, branching evolution or doubling season is...
It's just like...
Yeah, because again, let's say you just have the 3.
The 3.
One dies, you put 6 counters on the other two.
Those are 9/9s.
And they're 9/9s, and that one dies.
But 18.
And you put 18 counters. And it was a 9/9, so it's 27 power from one thing.
You can blink the non-token Gruff Triplets and make more and more and more triplets, like with Ephemerate or even a Conjurer's Closet if you're in mono green. My favorite thing that you can do with the Gruff Triplets is Greater Good.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, even, let's say you have no doubling shenanigans. You just have the 3. You sack the first one, you draw 3, you discard 3. Now you have 2 6/6s. You sack the second one, you draw 6, you discard 3. Now you've drawn 9 cards.
And you can sack the last one to draw...
12.
12. And discard 3.
And discard 3. And that's
so you're drawing 21 cards.
You're on 21 cards.
Off the one card.
And you've discarded 9, but you're up 11. You dug so deep. And that's off of 1 6-mana, like, creature on top of the Greater Good. And it's
one of the cards you drew was Ephemerate, so you actually can just reset the whole thing and go again.
And you're like, ta-da!
Actually, it's better than resetting it, yeah. That's it's pretty sweet. It reminds me of my Blaster deck, which does a lot of this math.
Yeah.
With the Ozolith and a Branching Evolution out, and you're like, if you have an Ozolith and a Branching Evolution, you need almost just Gruff Triplets to have like 1,000 power. It's crazy, the stuff you can pull off.
The thing, like, there's so many win cons that go with this too. Like, we're talking about engines right now, but just like an Altar of Dementia. Now you've sacked power, and now you sack that same power again. Now you sack that same power again.
Yeah,
and
it
you
combines.
End up, even with just one, you mill like 36 cards.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Something like that.
Yeah, so if you have an Ozolith
21.
or a Branching Evolution, that becomes like kill a player.
Yeah, all will be
fast.
one. Redistribute
all will be
counters
one. It's
so
so
fast.
brutal.
You're like, okay, ideal. I put 3 counters on. I deal 6 damage to that. Now I sack this, and I put 6 counters on that. And I
6 damage to that. Oh.
And it's just such a problem in a box, which is really what Commander's looking for. It's like why Avenger of Zendikar is so good.
Yeah.
Really, really fun, and it's got like a very silly flavor.
I like that card a lot.
Yeah.
All right, this next one's pretty powerful.
It is the Lich-Knight's Conquest. 4 and a black for a sorcery. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens. Return that many creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's sort of like a tokeny living death situation, but only for you. So it doesn't have that like board wipe side. It's more of like a Command the Dreadhorde mass reanimation spell.
Yep.
It's interesting. It's very, very good in decks that have a bunch of scrap, like we were talking about before. It's good in tchotchke decks where you're like, I need a way to turn...
Tchotchke decks?
Yeah. Where you just have a lot of knickknacks.
Yeah.
And you're like, I got to figure out how to turn this into money.
Right.
I'm going to sack 6 foods, which I'm certainly not going to pay for, to turn them into bodies. There's a lot of decks in Commander these days that are just like, I'm here to make 40 foods.
Right.
And you're like, what are you doing?
I have to figure out a way to spend them.
Yeah.
But step 1, make them, yeah.
Yeah, and this converts all of that stuff into actual power.
Sort of, because you have to have things in the graveyard.
Yep, that too.
I think that's part of the problem is like, if you have to go to all this setup to have the stuff to sacrifice to make this good, what is in your graveyard? Because you have to have also been like milling, or stuff has to be dying too, which is hard. I think it's going to be a difficult to find a deck that has the balance of like it. Once you've got your 6 food, you've got a graveyard with 6 also cool creatures in there.
Something I wanted to mention with this card is it says sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens. That could be artifact creatures. That could be enchantment creatures.
Oh, you can bring back the creatures you sacked with it?
You can. Is something that you...
Because it doesn't target when you...
Yep, it doesn't target. So they go to the graveyard, and then it's returned that many.
So it says, how many did you sacrifice? 5. Okay. So which ones?
And you're
choose.
like, these 5.
Okay.
So if you sacrificed a Wormcoil Engine to this, you get the tokens, then you can reanimate that same Wormcoil Engine, Solemn Simulacrum, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So if you're playing a dedicated artifact creature deck, like the Necron deck, feels like it would be really interested in a card like this, because you get a bunch of dice triggers and then a bunch of leave the graveyard triggers and then enter the battlefield triggers.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that makes it a little bit better because at least if I have these creatures, they are free usages of this card.
Yeah, it's like weird black blink.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of, yeah.
It's sweet with Sir Conrad.
This is how black blinks things. It kills them.
It kills them. It brings them back. Nobody likes it. It's yucky.
It hurts a little, but it does the job.
It's sweet in Sir Conrad because you sacrifice a bunch of things and then you get a bunch of things.
And then you bring a bunch of stuff back. Yeah. I would compare it to Command the Dreadhorde, which I think will probably be better most of the time, though.
Yeah. I want to try this in my Eloise Nefalius Sleuth deck, which is a Tchotchke deck. It just makes
a lot of clues.
And it surveils a lot. So ends up being a lot of stuff in the graveyard naturally.
That's true.
So it has both of those things going on and is a little light on actual ways to win without going infinite. So we'll give it a shot. But the creatures are kind of small in that deck. They're value creatures, not necessarily win the game creatures.
Get a lot.
That's true.
That's all.
Just got to go super wide.
All right, the next one is called Likeness Looter. It is a blue and a black, so 2 mana for a 1/1 fairy shapeshifter. Has flying. It is a looter, as you would expect. You can tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. It also has pay X, so you don't have to tap for the second ability. You just pay X, and Likeness Looter becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except it has flying and this ability. Activate only as a sorcery. Very similar to Lazav the Multifarious from the past. Yeah, this idea that it sort of copies something in your graveyard only, but it retains the ability to copy something else. It adds flying. That's because it's a fairy shapeshifter. And then the sorcery part is there to sort of keep it in check.
Yeah, the sorcery part is very important, I think. Yeah. Otherwise, you can do some really wild stuff with this, where like you can just give creatures haste, kind of like you could discard a card, turn it into it immediately, and then
attack it, and then mid-attack, change it into something else.
And that's sort of why Lazav is really cool, because you can give it hexproof, now infect, now this, and then it's huge. So Likeness Looter isn't quite that, but it's still sweet. The Looter plus the clone ability is a really neat engine.
Yeah, Lazav had Surveil, which is not as pinpoint accurate as a looting ability, because you can just have a card in your hand that you know you're going to put in your graveyard.
Right.
Yeah.
So this goes with a lot of things that Lazav goes with. It's like high power toughness creatures with either bad ETB abilities or just, creatures you don't really want to cast. Phyrexian Dreadnought, of course, is a 1 mana 12/12.
Yep. But it says when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures with power total 12 or more, or you have to sacrifice this Phyrexian Dreadnought.
So you really don't want it entering the battlefield.
Yeah, but Likeness Looter doesn't enter. It just becomes a copy of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like that it also has evasion attached to it. Is kind of a neat thing. So you can give creatures that don't naturally have evasion but do have combat damage abilities that evasion. Like Virtus the Veil is when he deals combat damage, you have the damaged player's life total, but his only evasion is Death Touch. So now he is flying and is a lot trickier to block, and he gets kind of pseudo haste. Because you can throw him in the graveyard on end of turn and then turn Likeness Looter into a Virtus and attack that turn, and they won't have seen it coming.
Yeah. This made me think of Phage.
Yeah.
Which I just looked up and is probably pretty good with this.
You
would never
surprise.
cast the Phage, but yeah, you loot it into the graveyard on the end step. And the flying is going to be a real big deal there.
Like,
Pay 6, turn it into a Phage. 7.
I was going to say, she's only 6?
Attack you with flying.
Okay. Wish I had my Agatha Soul Cauldron.
Yeah, that's cool.
Exile the Phage. Yeah, but I like that it gives these things haste.
Virtual haste.
Yeah, virtual haste in blue and black. So something even as simple as like Jace's Archivist, which is has an activated ability as blue tap wheel. The Archivist just tends to get bolted because it gets played in wheel decks and it has sorcery speed and it's difficult. But in a deck that wants to wheel and wants to wheel repeatedly, you can pitch the Archivist and then have it on your looter.
Yeah, they don't see it coming. You do it on the end step, and then Likeness Looter has been out, so it doesn't have Summoning Sickness.
Yeah.
Only 3 to copy. 1 to activate the ability. Yeah, it's the perfect card too because it refills your hand but also dumps a bunch of stuff into your yard, which is what you want.
Yep. It's just a really tidy card and a really neat engine. I think the decks that want it are really excited about it, and there's not a ton of them, but there's some neat stuff going on.
All right, the next one is a 3-mana rock, which we generally don't like. Will we like this one? Let's find out. Misleading Signpost. 2 and a blue for an artifact. It has flash. When Misleading Signpost enters the battlefield during the declare attacker's step, you may reselect which player or permanent target attacking creature is attacking. In parentheses, it can't attack its controller or their permanents.
Rude.
And then Misleading Signpost says tap and add a blue to your mana pool. So it is a 3-mana rock that messes with combat.
It has the Portal Mage ability, which is ETB, reselect. Yep. Be like, I want you to think about that attack again.
Well, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to do, actually.
You're going to think about it my way.
The only thing you can't do is attack them, or I guess you can't make it not attack at all.
Right.
But you can be like, oh, never mind, it's going to swing at my battle.
That's my favorite, is you can get to attack battles.
Yeah.
Be like, haha.
That battle I put on Craig, it is attacking that now. That's cool.
It's pretty sweet. You can also there's tricks so you can blink it, like Ghostly Flicker will blink your artifacts, Planar Incision, and then you can repeatedly use that ability. I will say Portal Mage is the kind of ability that I look at and I'm like, man, do I want to use that? But then you look at it and you're like, it's a 3-mana 2/2 and it doesn't do anything else. I cannot put this in a deck.
Well, and I've tried to make Portal Mage work, and when it works, it's sweet, but there are just a lot of games where you just never find a really good spot.
Yeah.
Where you have to have the mana open when a thing happens that you would want to redirect, and that is just a difficult thing to predict sometimes. So yeah, I don't think that ability is, unfortunately, it's cool, but it's not good enough to overcome the downside of a 3-mana rock. There's too many 2-mana rocks now. And for a 3-mana rock to be good, and there are some that are good, and they're doing a good job, I think, of making ones that are playable. This one doesn't quite pass the test for me because it's just so narrow. That what are you supposed to do? Like, you're supposed to hold this in your hand. I guess it's just trying to make it good when you draw it late, right?
Yeah.
But is the downside of 3-mana rocks they're bad when you draw them late? That's not the downside of 3-mana rocks. The downside of 3-mana rocks is they cost 3 and do the same thing as a lot of things that cost 2.
So I think this card's interesting because ramp at flash speed feels really good, especially if you're in a deck that works at instant speed, right? You're like, I have my draw spells, I have my counter spells, I want to be light on my feet. It's hard to develop your board and keep an eye on your opponents at the same time because you have to tap out for a rock, or you have to I have to get a creature down first. And I like the idea that you can be like, you know what? I'm not going to cast my counterspell. I'm just going to flash this rock in, or I'm going to mess up this combat if that happens. I think the Portal Mage ability is sweet, and when it's sweet, it'll be sweet. But the upside where you're like, I don't have to spend resources right now and until I know it's safe to do so is pretty cool. If you're in a deck that wants to move at instant speed.
Yeah, I just think 3-mana rocks cost you a mana generally, right? Because if you had a 2-mana rock, you would have played it the turn before, and now on your third turn, you would have 4 mana available to you.
Yeah.
But instead, you have this card, so on your third turn, you only have 3 mana available to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it often costs you 2 mana because you don't have a 1-drop, so you actually don't get to use the mana from this rock the turn you play it. Whereas if you had the 2-mana rock, you would use that mana on turn 3 and turn 4. Mm-hmm. So I think that downside is pretty bad, especially considering the fact that you're probably playing removal that is 2 or 3, in which case the 2-mana rock still gave you the ability to hold the same amount of mana. You just played it a turn early. The only time this is maybe a little bit better is when you have a 2-mana rock and this. But yeah, to me, it's just like any 2-mana rock is probably just going to be better overall, no matter how cool this ability is, unfortunately. Like I said, I like cards with cool abilities, and I would like to play 3-mana rocks to find enough upside to make that warranted. But yeah, I just don't see it here, unfortunately.
It's interesting, and I think this is the kind of card that's really fun to play And
when you get people, you're gonna feel cool.
Yeah, I mean, I still run the 4-mana one that says like you reselect all their attackers.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're just like, I know I'm the problem, but you're actually going to take them out because I'm busy.
Yeah, I don't want to be attacked.
I don't want to.
I don't like it. Yeah,
actually. So you can deal with me next turn.
All right, the next card is one of the big ones. I say one of the most talked about.
Yeah, for sure. This is Moonshaker Cavalry. 5 white, 8 mana altogether for a 6/6 flying spirit knight. When Moonshaker Cavalry enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's Moonhoof Behemory.
Yeah, Behemory.
Yep, you heard it here first.
It's Crater Moon
Cavamoth. Yeah, it's White's Crater Hoof Behemoth.
Yeah, and it's
gonna do a good impression.
It's gonna do a good impression. Flying, is it as good as Trample?
They're very close.
They're
often
very
flying
close.
is better. I'd say, it's hard for me to say either way.
It's a tough judge, but flying is comparable to Trample, and it's the same amount of buff, and it happens on ETB. I'm really excited about Moonshaker Cavalry. I don't think it's this amazingly designed card where you're like, oh, it's so clever.
I can't believe they came up with this.
Oh my God, a feat of design. But it's something that White hasn't gotten in the renaissance of White that we have had in the last couple of years. White has gotten card draw and ramp. It's been great. The only way that White closes out the game is like a Chroma's Will or Cathar's Crusade.
Or Craterhoof, right?
Or
They're getting it from
Craterhoof.
another color.
They have to lean on another color to do that. And a Chroma's Will was sort of the only example of a White you can slam it, and now all the creatures you have are a win con.
Felidar Retreat, I will say, actually, is
close.
a pretty good one. Because
I've
won a lot of games where it's like, all right, fetch land, give everything +2/+2, now win.
I mean, Felidar Retreat is one of the best White cards they've printed in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it is
slim,
a feat of design.
Yeah, I wasn't contradicting you. It's still slim pickings.
Yeah, there just isn't.
And Cathar sucks. Like,
it
is annoying to play.
It sucks. I don't have
like
it in
math
any deck.
and accounting.
No.
And I hate Cathars because you're always like, oh, never mind. This should have had this. And then 2 turns later, you're like, sorry, this should have been this. What are you? Yeah, this would have been that. Yeah.
And somebody commented on one of my deck listeners was like, why are you playing Cathar's Crusade? It's like, because I hate it. I don't want to do it, and I don't want to make my opponents watch me do it, and I know it'll win the game.
But I don't want the dreams I'm going to have afterwards.
But I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I just want a good night's sleep. I don't want to be going, okay, 18.
Wait, I had 3 creatures enter, so they all get 3 at the same time, but everything else gets 3 also. Now my dice are too small at this point.
I don't have enough.
I have to upgrade to D20s. Yeah, it's just White really needed another thing that you can just slam and the game's over, because White wins with combat damage a lot of the time, and you still do need that like big burst of power to close out a commander game all at once. So I think Moonshaker Cavalry is great. I think it's going to see a ton of play. I'm going to put it in 2 decks like basically right away. The biggest thing to talk about, of course, is it's 8 mana in White.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of downsides over Craterhoof, and it's probably just slightly less powerful, and it's not the flying versus trample thing. Craterhoof has haste, so it is another creature that gets its buff, which I think often does matter.
Yes.
And the second thing is green's just good at creating a lot of mana, and White's not and probably the worst at that. Yeah. So you're just likely to get to this a little slower. But I don't think that matters so much, because I think you probably run Craterhoof over this if your deck could run both and you only want one. But if your deck can't run Craterhoof, or you don't have that card, this is going to be nearly as good most of the time. And a lot of decks that don't have green, well, they can't play Craterhoof, in which case this becomes the default and is still going to do the job it's supposed to do. Like most games of Commander, you get to 8 mana.
Yeah. And
Casual, sorry CEDH people. They're like, what?
8 mana?
Yeah. On the turn you win, because I have Grim Monolith and Mana Vault out.
I did want to talk about this because 8 mana is a lot, but White in Commander does have 8 drops that show up a lot.
Yeah.
Like Avacyn Angel of Hope is a very common White win con, even though it doesn't give you any buff and only protects. I don't think this card is as good as it is
It's good,
expensive.
but you have to be willing to be mean to make it good. That's the problem.
Yeah, you have to Armageddon with it.
Yeah, don't do that.
And then you get swords in the game. Oh, no, it's a whole
You'll
thing.
win that game, but you won't have a lot of friends left.
Yeah. So, but Avacyn does show up a lot, and it is an 8 mana angel. And a lot of the time, Avacyn's getting cheated into play in some way.
Yeah.
And I think Moonshaker Cavalry will be cheated into play most of the time.
Oh,
like I think that you can probably get there with Treasures and Smothering Tide. Like you could cast this with mana, but White's actually pretty good at reanimation.
It is, but it's bad at getting it into the graveyard. That's the problem. It would have to be paired with red, I guess, realistically, because then you throw the possibilities or whatever it in there. Yeah, that's possible.
We've got Mask of Memory, and like we're still using Sun Titans and stuff. Like my white decks lean on the graveyard pretty hard.
Right, but getting this in there, I know it can get it out, but how does it get it in?
Usually looting with like Mask of Memory or artifacts or that kind of thing. It is not easy. But like Amaria Shepherd and Marshall's Anthem will get this thing out of the graveyard and give you a moment. Karmic Guide, of course.
Karmic Guide's great. Amaria Shepherd's 7 mana, so you're almost there. You just cast it.
Yeah, but you can reanimate it.
Yeah, but why do that?
If you sacked it and you do it again, and
that's
then
true.
Twice as big.
Also, if you are paired with red or something that can get into the graveyard, when they're not ready, then they might be like, "What's in your graveyard?" Well, it's not that scary, so I won't worry about it.
Yeah, it's this card's great. I think we're gonna see a lot of play.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna kill a lot of people. I mean, I would put Craterhoof on the list. I'm not saying it's number 1, but it's on the top 10 list of cards that has killed the most Commander players.
Yeah, and this will
probably start to approach that
list.
Yeah,
you can also blink it in white.
Yep,
like
that's true.
If you ETB and that buff isn't enough, blink it again. Now you're 4/1/1 spirits. They're 9/9s, 10/10s.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's true. Ephemerate doesn't exist in green. All right, the next card is called Mosswood Dreadknight. This one's cool. Yeah. It is a 1 in a green for a 3/2 human knight. It has trample. When it dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. So you guessed it does have an adventure side, which is called Dread Whispers, 1 in a black sorcery. You draw a card and then you lose 1 life. So again, you can cast the adventure, draw the card, lose 1 life, and then pay 1 in a green to cast this as a creature. And then when that creature dies, it says you can cast the adventure side until the end of your next turn. And if you do that, then you're now allowed to cast the creature side. And if that creature dies, you're going to get to continue in that loop. So this is a card, speaking of Lier and stuff earlier, that kind of does that loop on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And they're both 2-drops.
This card's so cool. I called you over and was like, hey, I'm looking at this. And this is a 2 mana 3/2 trample that draws a single card. But it seems awesome. Is it awesome?
And I was like, this seems awesome.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so we ultimately decided that this card is in fact awesome. And it's just because it's so cheap and it is an engine all its own. If you don't have other cards, this card, like if you have a sack outlet and this card, you're good.
Even if you don't have those things, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's likely to die. It's a blocker or it's just free attacker. They're not going to want to block. And then you'll start that loop. And man, just 4 mana 3/2 that draws a card and has additional upside, which this is that. It's better than that actually because you can pay it in installments. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's, when I say it's a 2-drop on each side, you just feel so good when you've got 2 drops because you're just like, this is going to make me mana efficient.
Yeah.
At some turn, I'm going to be like, I want to play this 4-drop, but I have this 2 mana left over. Sweet. I know exactly what to do with it.
And cast this little 3/2 that's been hanging out there.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
It just makes your mana so much tighter. And the more mana that you waste throughout the game, the further behind in the game you are. And it doesn't feel like a lot when you're like, I leave 1 mana open, I leave 2 mana open or something. But you can feel yourself just slipping back, and this allows you to just make sure that you're using everything efficiently, especially if you have a sack outlet that makes mana.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing new and intermediate players could do to improve how good they are at Magic is to be mana efficient.
Yeah.
To just do more things during a game. The strategy is fun and it's important, but a lot of players are holding things in hand and not spending mana. And then it's like, I use 3 of the 5 mana I have available because I might have wanted to do this. I didn't end up doing it. And then the next turn, I cast a 5-drop, but I had 6 mana. And then the next turn, I did this other thing. And I didn't use 5 to 7 mana over the course of a game. And Rachel used all her mana, which means she did 2 or 3 more impactful things in that game than I did, which gives her a much higher chance to win that game than I did, just by virtue of the number of things done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why treasures are so powerful, right? Because treasures give you that extra mana if you need it, but you didn't waste any of your free mana.
And you can't be non-mana efficient with them, because if you don't use them, you use it later.
You still have them.
So it's hard to screw it up. Yeah.
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 I think this card's really great. It's great with cards that we already play. It's great with Phyrexian Altar, which can sack it to make the mana to recast the other side. It's great with Ashnod's Altar, because that makes the 2 colorless mana that you need to sack this and keep playing. But the most powerful thing about this card is that it just keeps showing up and keeps being a problem, and it's just a free thing to attack with when you've got a damage trigger. It's doing a lot for you without looking super impressive, which, like we said with the dragon before, is really good.
Yeah, this is just going to be an annoying card that it won't even be on your opponent's radar.
Yeah.
But you'll just be feeling so good. Like, I drew 2 things off this thing. I got 6 damage in. I blocked something and saved myself 5 life. That's a lot for a card at a 2 mana price point. Yeah.
Yeah. Really sweet.
I love it.
We have a couple more cards to talk about this episode, including something that some people are saying is going to be one of the best new white removal spells. We'll see what we think about it after a few words from our sponsors.
Whether you're searching for the latest sneaker drop, that iconic handbag, a timeless watch, or your next piece of classic jewelry, eBay authenticators are there verifying every detail of your purchase.
Yep, we're talking each inch, stitch, tick, facet, and clasp that make the piece you're searching for worthy of your collection.
eBay's authenticators are experts in their craft, true connoisseurs.
And as leaders in their fields, they're making sure your items always arrive as authentic as your style. So go ahead, get that piece you've always wanted.
And leave it up to the meticulous eyes of an eBay authenticator to make sure that watch movement is original, that glimmer is real gold, that rare sneaker is legit, or that handbag is really made of genuine leather, and never get faked over again.
In a world full of fakes, it's time to get real with eBay Authenticity Guarantee.
Everyone deserves real. Visit ebay.com for terms.
I think it might need more card draw.
Who are you talking to? Or is that just something you say?
Oh, no, I'm on a call with Jimmy. We're building a Chatterfang deck.
Ooh, I just added Toski. That should help, right?
Whoa, the card just showed up.
Yeah, with Architect, you can collaborate in real time from anywhere in the world.
Changes show up immediately. You don't even have to reload the page.
So it's perfect for brewing with a friend.
This is cool, but isn't Jimmy just upstairs?
Yeah, but I'm downstairs right now.
I ain't coming downstairs.
Architect is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to architect.com/command zone to get started.
That's archidekt.com/command zone.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about the cards that are going to go in your decks from Wilds of Eldraine, starting with a card that has gotten a lot of chit-chat. It is Stroke of Midnight. 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. It's a 3 mana removal spell that removes anything but lands and makes a wee token in exchange. So, of course, the obvious comparison is Generous Gift. We play a lot of it. The main difference between Generous Gift and Stroke of Midnight, Generous Gift can hit lands. Stroke of Midnight cannot. And Generous Gift gives them a 3/3. Stroke of Midnight gives them a 1/1.
How much do we care about the 3/3 versus 1/1, first of all?
It depends on what deck you're playing. Like if you're playing a defensive deck, giving them a 3/3 can often be a problem. But 2 power difference, if you're just trying to get a problem gone, is not quite worth the flexibility in Generous Gift.
Let me ask this another way. How many times have you ever had a 3/3 ground creature in a game of Commander be something where you're like, that thing's a problem?
So 3/3 ground creatures are not often problems. They do prevent you from dying. They do they do stuff.
Right. But
what does a 3/3 do more than a 1/1 in those scenarios? Is effectively nothing.
Right, because it's going to block it.
It's going to chump. You can sacrifice it with like a Deadly Dispute or something like that.
3 damage.
It's a free attack, or it'll get buffed by a Crater Hoof. But the difference between 1 and 2 power isn't that big of a difference. And the difference between that player having a Cabal Coffers and not having a Cabal Coffers is very big.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
How often is there a land that you wish was gone?
I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
People do not answer my Nykthos, and it is wrong. They're like, oh, we'll just kill your board. You're like, no, the Nykthos is the problem here.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. For me, Stroke of Midnight is quite worse than Generous Gift. I don't run Generous Gift.
So it's worse than a card that, I kind of agree, actually.
And
so
that's
you're actually pretty low on Stroke of Midnight.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about it because a lot of people are really excited about it. And I'm less excited about Generous Gift than I used to be. And this is a hot take. A lot of people are like, it kills lands. You play it. Because there aren't a lot of removal spells in white that do hit lands. The problem is, I run Wasteland or Demolition Field, or like I remove lands in other ways. And I play a lot of monocolored decks, so I have a lot of the colorless lands that can solve those problems. And for me, it hitting a land doesn't make up for the fact that it destroys, not exiles, and it's 3 mana.
Yeah, if Stroke of Midnight exiled, then the conversation would be different. And I think I wish it kind of did that, because it would be different enough from Generous or Gift to warrant even including both, but definitely be more of a conversation. Because I agree with you. I don't play a lot of Generous Gift. 3 mana is just a lot.
It's a lot.
It doesn't feel good anymore to spend 3 mana to remove stuff. I want that to be 2, or, I really want it to be 1, but yeah.
And if I spend 3 mana on it, I want it gone.
Yeah.
I'm in white. I have exile. I want it out. Excise the Imperfect does. Exile target non-land permanent. Its controller incubates X, where X is its mana value. It's 2 white pips. It's 1 white rather than 2 and a white. But Excise the Imperfect, I think, does way more than both of those cards.
Because it exiles.
Yeah. I'm willing to spend 3 because I know that if I solve that problem is gone.
And it gets rid of like the gods and things like that. So the non-land permanent's a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. So Excise the Imperfect, even better than either of the other 2, maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely better than Stroke of Midnight.
Right. So I just think, to people who are super excited about Stroke of Midnight, look again at your removal suite. Look at Soul Partition. I think that card is much more powerful than people give it credit for. Look at Excise the Imperfect. If you're playing a creature-based strategy, which you're in white, you probably are. Like, I run Skyclave Apparition over both of those cards because I can blink it, I can reanimate it, I can block with it. It is way easier for me to manipulate Skyclave Apparition than it is a 3-mana
white doesn't have a like
destroys.
Snapcaster Mage or something, so it's like an instant sorcery is a little bit worse. A creature's probably better. Yeah.
I can sack a Skyclave Apparition and get it back with Savin's Reclamation. Like, there's more I can do with a Cathar Commando than I can with Stroke of Midnight, which is a little overcosted and hard to manipulate.
I agree.
Okay.
I just like...
So that's my hot take of the episode.
This next one is interesting. I had it in a sealed pool. It's the Irencrag. It's 2 mana for a legendary artifact. You can tap it to add colorless mana. It says, whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have the Irencrag become a legendary equipment artifact named Everflame, Hero's Legacy. If you do, it gains 3, and equipped creature gets +3/+3. And this is important, it's the mana rock that loses all other abilities. It's the Sword in the Stone, as you can see in the photo.
Which is sick.
Yeah. A legendary creature shows up, pulls the sword out of the stone, and it's not a mana rock anymore. It is Excalibur. Everflame, Hero's Legacy. Yeah. But people have misread that last part. Equipped creature gets +3/+3, but the Irencrag loses all its other abilities. So you cannot tap this sword, the Everflame for mana.
Yeah.
And so it just changes into the equipment, and that's what it is. And there's no way to change it back without bouncing it, blinking it, something like that. This is a 2 mana rock at its heart, right? Like, it is 2 mana and it taps 4 mana, and you never have to change it into I keep wanting to say Excalibur, the Everflame side. You just can, and you can only do that when a legendary creature enters the battlefield. All right, how good is it?
It's colorless mana rock. It taps for colorless, so I think immediately that puts it worse than every other colored mana rock for me. Like, that's worse than Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, all of the talismans, all of the signets. It giving you colored mana in Commander is so much more helpful to getting your Commander out a turn earlier than a colorless mana source is, unless you're in a monocolored deck.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What about monocolored deck?
I still like having the colored mana, because if I'm playing monocolored, I'm taking advantage of it that I'm playing monocolored. So I play a lot of high pipped cards. It sucks that even in a monocolored deck, you still run Arcane Signet, because there's no untapped, diamond, So Mindstone's good, and of course I run Mindstone, but I just don't think it tapping for colorless, there are just issues with it.
Yeah, Mindstone I think is better, because I often will get the card draw off of it.
Yeah.
So it falls somewhere below Mind Stone, which is Thought Vessel territory. Prismatic Lens is another card I was thinking about.
Yeah. It does a similar thing to Mind Stone that I wanted to mention is like Mind Stone is like when I'm good on mana and I don't need it, I can turn it into a card. And that's what the Irencrag says. Is like if you're good on mana, you don't have mana anymore. Now you have just raw power.
Yeah.
And if your deck cares about having like if you ever want to draw, if there are moments in your deck where you want to draw 3 power.
An equipment deck.
Yeah.
So that's definitely worth it. And I think, there are commanders that care about like what their own power is and things like that. So that probably goes there. But as like a card that's going to replace Mind Stone Thought Vessel stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Thought Vessel is an interesting one because I think card's overrated. Like people play it, and most games don't have enough cards that it ever matters.
Yeah.
So, is there any case to be made that it's better than Thought Vessel? Prismatic Lens, I came down on the side of I think Prismatic Lens is probably better because even though it's inefficient when it creates colored mana, it can.
It can,
and that will save you sometimes. Yeah, especially when you want to cast Beseech the Mirror or something like that.
Yeah. I think if you're in an equipment deck or it cares about your commander's power or like there's some reason why power is important, like if you're in a deck where you're drawing 100 cards and you don't care about the power of anything, then obviously Thought Vessel is going to do more for you than the Irencrag is.
Right.
I don't think the no maximum hand size thing is as good as people give it credit for. I think you just make the choice and you keep the good ones, and then you don't have those turns where you have 20 cards in hand and you're like,
Right.
It just make the decision, move on.
Yep. The best 7 cards out of your 20 are going to be a lot closer to just having the 20 than you think.
Yeah, unless you have a card that, like Commander that specifically says equal to the power of cards in your hand or something like that. But most of the time, I think Irencrag does more than Thought Vessel. But if you're never going to like pay 3 mana to equip something, then it doesn't do that much for you. So it's interesting.
I think it's a playable card. You could probably see it and not, again, you want a certain number of 2 mana rocks, and I don't think your deck will be that much more or less powerful either way, even if you have that instead of Mind Stone.
Yeah.
And, not everybody's got a Mind Stone for every deck or whatever. So I think this card is still playable as a 2 mana rock that sometimes does a little bit more.
Is it better than Liquid Metal Torque?
Again, probably in some decks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Probably in a lot of decks. I can count the number of times I've actually activated Liquid Metal Torque probably on one hand.
Yeah.
When I have, it's been awesome.
It's been great.
Yeah. But, a equipment that equips for 3 and gives +3/+3 is not great.
Yeah.
You would have to be losing a game or in a very bad spot to be like, that's the best thing I can do.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Or an equipment deck. But again, that's the equivalent of being in a artifact deck for a Liquid Metal Torque or something that cares about artifacts.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on. We've got a few more to go.
Speaking of monocolored decks, this one is the Throne of Eldraine. It's a 5-mana legendary artifact. When it enters, choose a color. Tap, add 4 mana of the chosen color. Spend this mana only to cast monocolored spells of that color. Also, 3 in tap. Draw 2 cards. Spend only mana of the chosen color to activate this ability. It's a 5-mana rock. Comes in untapped. Taps for 4.
Right.
And has a draw ability on it.
Only playable in a monocolored deck.
Only playable in a monocolored deck, right?
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah. Because otherwise you can't cast half the spells in your deck or more.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there might be some 2-color decks that are like 80% red or 80% whatever that you could think about it. But even then, I don't want 20% of my cards I can't cast with this thing.
Yeah.
Because it makes it quite bad.
But in monocolored decks, this card seems sick. I mean, like, it's 5 mana. It's a lot. But it only costs you 1 mana if you are not like a dedicated artifact deck or you're not, you don't have a lot of colorless spells.
Yep.
That's pretty good.
It will make this current turn slightly less powerful to make the next turn incredibly more powerful.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. What you a common play pattern is going to be do this, immediately tap it to do something else. I had a reasonable turn, and now I have 10 mana.
Next turn.
Next turn, and everybody else has 7 or 8. And I think that is just a recipe for winning games because often it's just the person who has the big turn sort of first that can pull off a victory. So yeah, I think it's quite powerful. When you compare it to like Thrawn Dynamo, it's 1 more mana. It's colored mana. Again, only in monocolored decks.
And it has
an additional upside.
Draw ability.
I think that draw ability is not great. And if you're doing that, you're probably in trouble because you're paying 4 mana to draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
Because there's... Well, shoot, you're not paying 4
mana. You're
paying 7 mana.
7 mana to draw 2 cards because you're tapping your mana rock to do it. Yeah.
So you must be in very big trouble to be doing that. Mm-hmm. But when you compare it to Gilded Lotus, which is 5 mana to get 3 colored mana, it gives 1 more.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of Nyx Lotus. I think this is like the closest comparison, which Nyx Lotus enters tapped. It's 4 mana. It enters the battlefield tapped. Tap, choose a color, add an amount of mana equal to your devotion to that color. So it's best in monocolor decks. It does the same thing where it's like it comes in and your next turn is going to be wild. But Nyx Lotus depends on you having a board. It depends on you having a devoted board.
Yep.
And it comes in tapped. So you pay it
the
on
tapped is huge.
You play it on 4 and that's it. That's your turn.
If it didn't come in tapped, that card would be
Amazing.
playable, but as now it's bad. Like,
Right.
yeah, every time somebody plays a Nyx Lotus, I'm like, sorry about that. Like, that's bad for you. Yeah.
I've had enough Nyx Lotuses blown up that I'm like, great, that card's coming out.
Yeah,
like if they destroy it
never
before it
let you do
untaps,
it.
it's terrible.
The only time they'll destroy it is when they're like, you have 1 devotion. Okay,
Right.
fine, you can
and you're
have
like,
it.
great, my 4 mana tap for 1. This is
Yeah.
the bad monolith. Great. Throne of Eldraine comes in and it costs you 1 mana efficiency, where Nyx Lotus costs you 4 mana inefficiency, which is just brutal.
Yeah. So in a monocolor deck, I think basically every monocolor deck wants to play Throne of Eldraine.
Yeah.
And the only time you might think about it not is maybe if 20%, 25% or more of your deck is artifacts. Even then, you probably still do it. It probably has to be something like 35% of your deck is artifacts before you wouldn't.
I mean, I still probably don't run this in like Octavia, which is trying to be efficient. Like if I'm not casting something huge, then I don't care about this. If I'm an instant speed deck or something like that.
I don't know. You still can hold it up. And as long as you cast monocolor
you
stuff,
cast
you're
it
good.
and then you can still cast a draw spell.
Yeah. Just think of...
It comes in untapped. It's
let's
so good.
imagine a scenario where you just have a counter spell.
Yeah.
And you cast this and you sit on your counter spell and you say go.
Yeah.
You're in a pretty good spot. Anything extremely scary, you can stop 1 of it.
Yeah.
And then you're going to untap and you're going to play a land and you're going to be like, cool, I got 10 mana to play with.
Now what?
On turn 6. And that's if I didn't play a rock or something earlier.
Yeah.
Like, that is like, now the world's my oyster.
Right.
Right? So the fact that it could allow you in a very, not even a good situation to have that, I think is pretty strong.
It feels super free.
Yeah.
It feels super free to take 1 mana off of your turn 5 to put you a little bit behind. And I play a lot of 4 drops anyway, so
yeah, exactly.
I'm not worried about it.
Exactly.
4 mana is a strong slot. All right. We're moving on to one of the other cycles in Eldraine. These are the Virtue of cycles.
Yeah, they're all adventure cards. They're enchantments on their main side.
Yeah.
Okay. There are 5 of them. Let's go. Virtue of Courage is the red one. 3 red, red. The enchantment is whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. So you lightning bolt them.
You
impulse draw 3. It has an adventure side, which is 1 in a red for Embereth Blaze. An instant, Embereth Blaze deals 2 damage to any target. It will be impossible for those 2 damage to trigger the enchantment because
there's
just no way. There's no way.
Non-commander, yeah.
Yeah. But you play this, if you can do non-combat damage, you kind of get card draw.
A lot.
And it's the amount of non-combat damage you've done. So it's not the number of instances, it's the amount.
Yes. So let's talk about this adventure spell real quick. It's 2 damage to any target. 2 damage doesn't usually do a lot, but it's kind of free. Of the top 100 most played creatures on EDH Rec, if you deal 2 damage to that creature, 60 creatures could be removed by this spell. To the top 100,
seems like a lot.
60. But 22 of those creatures are not great removal targets. You know,
what do you mean?
The Sakura Tribe Elders or Wood Elves or like these
stuff that already did their thing, or you don't care.
Yeah, you're not going to spend a removal spell to remove them. So
that's down to 38 creatures that it like effectively hits.
Effectively can kill. Also in those 22 are creatures that sacrifice themselves.
Got it.
Okay. Which are very dangerous. 40 of those creatures cannot be removed by this spell. Of the 100 most played commanders, this can only kill 13 of the top 100 commanders. So not killing a ton of things. It can go face.
I guess if you got nothing else to do on turn 2, you just do that.
You could hit a planeswalker.
Oh, that's actually not bad.
You could hit a battle.
Okay, that's coming up more and more, actually.
It's any target.
Actually, battles are happening more than I thought they would.
But battles are pretty sweet. And if you have a good battle, the battle's probably great for you.
And if you're in a non-combat deck, you're probably more likely to play battles. So, yeah okay. So it's something. It's not nothing.
It's not nothing. It can probably do stuff. I did want to do a word of warning on this one, because I have done this a lot. When you cast a an instant spell, and it has a single target. If that target is removed, you lose the whole spell. You lose the enchantment. It's gone. So if like you go to bolt somebody and they're like, actually, I have hexproof, the whole spell gone.
If they sack it in response?
If you try and bolt a Sakura Tribe-Elder and they sack it in response, whole spell gone. So you have to be very careful about where this goes.
Oh, it won't go into exile and then you can't...
No, it goes to graveyard. So if you bolt the wrong thing and they sacrifice it in response, they will count, like you will lose this enchantment. So maybe don't risk it.
Yeah, this seems like one of the most likely ones to you just don't, for the most part, cast the adventure side. You're just going to straight up cast this as an enchantment most of the time. Not that you'll never do the other thing, but yeah, it's just not enough upside.
It's a big risk because this is a very powerful enchantment if it's in your deck. So let's talk about it. It reminds me of Circara, who said, like, if you deal combat damage, you impulse draw. So you could impulse draw up to 3 if you deal 3 damage all at once. Yeah. But this deal does that many?
Right. I mean, it's good. It's a lot. If you are in a deck that's dealing a lot of non-combat damage.
Yes.
So you have to be dealing Two-Face or Burn or whatever. You put Dragon's Approach. We both have a Dragon's Approach deck.
We sure do. You cast 1 Dragon's Approach, you impulse draw 9.
Which is definitely going to get you some more Dragon's Approaches.
Yeah, you're going to find some more.
The problem here is
you draw too many. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that is a little bit of a problem because you can't play them all in a turn unless one of those is a mana geyser. So then you'll be fine.
It does say you may
or
exile.
Jessica's will. Oh, you don't have to.
You may exile.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, you have to do all or none though per effect. Okay.
Yeah.
It is 5 mana, so you are unlikely to cast this and then burn them in some way that turn.
Yeah.
Which is a big downside, and not because people remove it, although they might, but because you paid 5 mana and did nothing.
In Dragon's Approach, I just sort of want to keep going.
I can't imagine a turn with my Dragon's Approach deck where turn 4, 5, 6 where I do nothing. I gotta be dealing damage or killing stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a really tough thing. Is like everybody's talking about it in Perforos, and you're like, it seems wild in Perforos. But what are you going to do with all of those cards after, and you've cast this 5 mana enchantment, and you still need creatures to enter the battlefield, and you need Perforos and this in play, plus a way to get creatures to enter? That seems expensive.
Hey, if you got Perforos out and you're doing the thing anyway, like, whatever. I don't need to draw a lot of cards. I'll just keep I just need like 5 more creatures to enter the battlefield. Everyone's dead.
Yeah, you just need a lot of mana.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where 5 mana do-nothings are very hard to play. And I think if you look at Doubling Season, that is the poster child for this, which we used to see a lot of Doubling Seasons get played. And now if you're not a Super Friends deck, if you're a 1/1 counters deck or your tokens deck, Doubling Season is tough to play. It's just a little too late. Anointed Procession or Parallel Lives, Branching Evolution, Winding Constrictor, or Hardened Scales even fill the role you need at a point where you don't have to stick your neck out so far and be so vulnerable.
Right.
Because this is like, I'm really scary. I also am really, really vulnerable because I took a very important turn and did nothing.
And this also doesn't say, like, we play Fiery Emancipation, which is a 6 mana enchantment. But when you play Fiery Emancipation, then now you can attack.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This one is not combat. So you can't, like, set it up, cast this, attack with ability things. Yeah.
Yeah, you need, like, a Heartless Idetsugu or something that's already on board. And if you have an untapped Heartless Idetsugu, you're probably good.
One thing I'll say is Jessica's Will.
Yes.
And Mana Geyser.
That's true.
And this is a card that you just hold in your hand until you have one of those. And so you can have one of those crazy turns. And that's kind of how Red goes these days. Neheb or something like that. Mm-hmm. Those decks that are like, and Red's very good at this now, Dockside Distortionist, where they're just like, what's going to happen is you're going to play a Mana Rock into your Throne of Eldraine, and somebody's going to Rampant Growth and Cultivate, and I'm just going to land drop, and look like I only have 5 mana, and then I'm going to play 2 Ritual type spells, and I'll just have a 22 mana on turn 7. And then I go Virtue of Courage. Now it's a totally different story because I go Dragon's Approach. What I get? Oh, a Jessica's Will. Now
Jessica's Will, more mana.
Oh, more mana. Oh, now I got the Dockside. And so I strung it all together and just won on turn 6 because of this card.
It's a Storm card, for sure.
Yeah.
If you're running those big mana cards, if you have those turns where you have a ton of mana, this card is going to be amazing and really, really powerful, and you will win the game off the back of it probably. But yeah, it definitely only goes in the decks where you can have those huge explosive turns.
Yeah.
We have to mention it because it's exactly the synergy. It's Passionate Archaeologist. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, you deal damage to an opponent. So you can cast a spell, exile some cards, cast a spell, exile some cards.
I'm glad it's a May on the other one.
Yeah, it's a loop. As long as you have the mana to do it.
That is cool.
All right, let's keep moving to the blue one. It's Virtue of Knowledge. It's a 4 and a blue for an enchantment. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. We know this one. It also has an adventure. It's 1 and a blue for an instant. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So it's a blue Panharmonicon-ish.
Yeah, it's a Panharmonicon on one side and one activation of a Strionic Resonator kind of on the other.
We love both of those cards.
They're both useful.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 5-mana do-nothing enchantment. It is. Mm-hmm. But we play Panharmonicons, we play Elesh Norn Mother of Machines, we play Yarok. All of these are when stuff enters, it does it twice.
And those decks do have abilities that you would want to copy with the other side. That'll happen before the 5 mana can be cast. So you have a better chance of using the adventure side than the red one, I think. And to good effect.
You're also targeting your own ability. Yep. So unless they have a way to stifle it or something, you're less likely to lose your enchantment to some sort of counterspell or something like that.
Yeah, really good point.
Yeah.
That would be so brutal.
Oh, if they
I do this, I hold priority. With that ability on the stack, I go to use the adventure on it, and they're like, I'll stifle the ability.
Stifle the ability.
Please do that.
Lose the copy.
Yeah.
Lose the enchantment. Oh, God.
That's almost worse than getting your fetch land stifled.
So brutal.
When you get turn 1, if it's never happened to you, I hope it happens to you someday.
Fetch lands with this. That's pretty sick.
Yeah. If it's never happened to you that somebody's just turn 1 stifled your fetch land, like, you should experience once just to know how much it sucks.
I run the...
You have 0 lands.
Yeah. It's like, great.
Thanks, dude.
Great. Thank you. Pass.
Yeah, I guess I lose this game.
I had a swamp strip mined by like a 10-year-old once, and I was like, yeah, all right, that is a play you could do, I suppose. I didn't play around that. Man, I mean, this card's great. And I think if you're playing blue and you can only run Panharmonicon, you probably want a second copy of this. Like if you don't have an Elesh Norn or a Yarok in the deck already, you probably want a second copy. I don't think you want a third. Like if you're in white-blue and you have Mother of Machines and Panharmonicon, do you also run Virtue of Knowledge?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you pick 2 of those 3.
And I think Mother of Machines is probably a little bit better.
Yeah.
Because it does something. It's a blocker. It has more effect. It stops your opponent's stuff. Like it's just a much bigger effect. Virtue of Knowledge, very powerful when you untap with it. Mm-hmm. But it is similar to the red one in that you did nothing. Like you paid 5 mana, you did nothing. You have to follow it. It makes all subsequent plays more powerful.
Yeah.
Like I've admitted on I forget which episode it was, like I don't play Vidalcan Ori that much anymore. Vidalcan Ori is in the same mold as this card. What's it do? It makes my subsequent plays more powerful because I can time them differently. This one is a little more in your face about how it makes it more powerful, but it in philosophy does the same thing. And it is just hard to find a spot to be like 5 mana. I'm going to be more powerful from here, but I did nothing right now.
Yeah.
So... yeah, I think this is good, and will see play and should see play because it is powerful enough to kind of make up for it.
Yeah.
But it will be a little touchy, and you're right. I think you definitely don't want 4 of this ability in your deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Word of warning about this card. It says, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. That will include bounce lands.
Oh, yeah. Don't play bounce lands.
Don't play bounce lands
with that card.
if you're also playing this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've seen them do that with Elesh Norn. Don't.
That's
be
brutal.
Careful.
That's brutal.
Let's move on to Virtue of Loyalty.
All right, this is the white one. It is 3 white for the enchantment side, which says, at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and then untap those creatures. That is quite powerful.
Pretty good.
The adventure side is 1 white for an instant adventure. It says, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. All of that for a 2/2.
Okay, it's an instant. You can't fizzle it. That's great.
I mean, it's quite good, right? A 2 mana flash 2/2 is fine, but you can always use it.
Yeah.
It's not like the last 2 where there's sort of specific instances where they're even going to be really good. And then, geez, the other side seems very good. Remember, it's at the beginning of your end step. This happens every turn. All of your creatures get a +1/+1 counter, and they untap.
Yeah, like we talk about Felidar Retreat all the time. The Felidar Retreat is awesome. This isn't quite Felidar Retreat, but it gives you that just like impending deal with me, and your creatures are untapped, so you're free to swing out, like bonk a bunch of people, and then they're bigger and untapped. This is a wild defensive card.
It's a defensive card with inevitability on it, which is exactly what you want when you're playing defense, right? Which like, I'll just wait and then I'm going to kill you. And the killing part is inevitable.
This is exactly how I play mono white, where it's just like, look, you're not going to be able to deal with me, and unless you kill me now,
I'll be worse later. I'll be stronger later.
It's a chokehold where you're like, I'm just gaining 5 life a turn, and I'm hitting you for 5 every turn,
and it'll be 7 next turn.
And it's just a chokehold. And obviously, this isn't Seedborn Muse, but untapping all of your creatures is. It's really good.
It's Wilderness Reclamation to Seedborn Muse, and Wilderness Reclamation is still busted.
Right.
And I think the untapping is, there's just so many ways to break it. Mana Dorks.
Yeah.
Right? Cryptolith Right.
Yeah.
Right? Just any sort of activated abilities that cause tapping are going to be able to be done twice. And like a Tim now kills a 2/2, right? That's a totally different thing. It kills your Oracle of Moldiah. Like there's so many ways to use it. I don't know. I love this card. I think it's really good.
You love to untap stuff. You see untap and you're like, yes.
Yeah. And that's making the things bigger over the time too. So you're just like, oh, it just, that inevitability is really important. Like the Tim deck right now, it can stop most things, it can control most things. And the fact that this is like, cool, just do that 2 turns, they're all 3/3s and kill, and then just attack them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can keep, and I even like the night side.
Yeah.
Because just flashing in a blocker that they didn't know you had is so annoying. Sometimes you get attacked for some little, like, all right, I'll send my 1/1 at you because you don't have any blockers and I've got a professional face breaker. And you're just like, humph.
They're a Ragavan?
Yeah.
That's the worst thing to happen to them in the world. You're like, I don't care about this 2/2. You don't have a Ragavan anymore. You know, they're Timna.
It's devastating.
Yeah, they're like, Timna. Oh, sorry. It's the worst.
And it's also like, it's a 2/2 with vigilance, right? So it's a little weird because you untap it. Like it sort of has vigilance anyway. But it's like a 2/2 now and a 3/3 and a 4/4 and a 5/5. You're like, I don't want to remove the token, but the token keeps hitting me.
Yeah, they get to the point where they're like, well, I want to remove their board, but then the next creatures they play just keep growing after that.
Yeah, it's really sweet. I mean, I've talked recently about Lulu Loyal Hollyfont, and I think that card is really quite underplayed, and that one requires a permanent you control to go to the battlefield in order to put counters on stuff and then untap them. It does effectively the same thing and has a more stringent trigger. But I think if you are playing an aggressive white deck, especially if you have flyers or like just free attacks, this card is going to be really impressive and really frustrating.
Imagine you had this out and you played that blue bounce board wipe that gave you the 1/1s.
Oh my God.
And then it's like, and by the way, at end step, they're all 2/2 flyers now.
This thing in limited is just
3/3.
like, what do you even, there's just impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible to beat in limited.
I did want to talk about this with Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Oh God, why? It's so good.
Like, it's crazy with Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Yeah, just free counters on all your stuff.
It does everything. It puts the counters on so that they get the abilities, and it untaps them so they can use the abilities more times. I did try to figure out a way that if there was any space between, like, counters,
tap, untap.
Yeah, basically the first time you get the counters on everything, you will not be able to sort of tap the creatures and then still get the untap. That will have to wait for later turns. But still, yeah, at that point, like, just a mana dork in your graveyard means Agatha's Soul Cauldron goes tap, exile that mana dork, or anybody's graveyard, sorry. And then, maybe you attacked with the creatures or whatever. Virtue of Velocia says, put all 1/1 counters on them, untap them. Now all those are mana dorks.
Yep.
That's just a mana dork.
That's really, really good.
Yeah.
It leaves all of your mana open. Ugh. Really sweet card. I think it's going to see a bunch of play. And it's got the same thing as the Felidar Retreat problem, where it's just like, it gives you a creature, it gives you a board, it makes you difficult. Like, you can't board wipe if they have a Felidar Retreat because they just are really going to rebuild faster.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. Really sweet. All right. Let's keep moving to the black one.
Less sweet.
Less sweet. Very expensive. 5 black for an enchantment. Already rough.
Virtue of Persistence.
Virtue of Persistence. Yeah, but, black known for its persistence.
I thought it was Pestilence.
Nope.
I started to say persistent. I went, wait.
Nope, it is Persistence.
Okay.
It says, at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control.
7 mana for an enchantment that every end step. Every upkeep.
On your upkeep.
Reanimates.
Yeah. It's like the Portal to Phyrexia ability without the sacrifice of the 3 creatures.
That's not the good part.
You know the part that you forgot on the Portal to Phyrexia? And then it has an adventure side called Lochthwain's Scorn. 1 and a black for a sorcery.
Sorcery this time.
Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life.
Why is that a sorcery? Every other one was an instant.
Yeah, and it's 7 mana. Just give us
Yeah, just give us
the instant.
Yeah.
Please. Sorcery Speed makes this a way worse as a removal spell, this adventure spell. Of the top 100 most played creatures, this can remove 77 of the top 100. Of course, 22 creatures are not good removal targets, so it can remove like 55 relevant creatures. I included like Mana Dorks as a relevant target for this. 23 creatures cannot be removed by this spell. Of the top 100 most played commanders, 33 commanders can be removed by this spell. 67 commanders cannot. Again, careful of getting your big enchantment fizzled.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's, I don't know. There's not a lot to say. I don't think it's good because the removal side is Sorcery Speed, which is way worse. I can't see if that thing's a threat to me before killing it.
Yeah.
And then 7 mana for the second effect is...
Paying 7 mana and waiting turn for something to happen is not something that happens in Commander anymore.
If we didn't like 5 mana do nothings that much, we don't like 7 mana do nothings.
We do not like 7. Yeah, this is too expensive. I don't think we're going to see any of Virtue of Persistence. Also, the weirdest name.
Persistent. Well, I mean, they do persist.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
They don't die, if that's what persistence means.
Or they keep coming back.
Yeah,
I think
that's true. They do die. One more.
All right, last one is the green one, Virtue of Strength. 5 green, so also 7 mana for an enchantment. If you tap a basic land for mana, a basic land, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. Okay. And then the adventure side is also a sorcery, but it's 1 green. Return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. So regrowth, but only for creature or land.
Okay. We'll talk about this adventure spell really quick. This is pretty good. This targets like relevant stuff if you're playing green. It's a single green and it feels super free. So if you want this enchantment, this feels like a completely free recursion spell, which is great.
Yeah, I wouldn't just play that recursion spell probably.
No, not on its own card.
Yeah, so it is a useful thing to have. It makes it a little better when you draw it late. Early, you might not even have anything in there. So that might be a little bit of the problem of deploying it.
Even then, you can get a fetch land back.
Yeah, hopefully you've got a fetch in there. But there's definitely games on turn 3 and 4 where I just don't have anything in there yet because I just didn't happen to draw the fetch.
Yeah.
So it might not always be that easiest to sort of get value off that front side. But I would assume by the time you got 7 mana, you'd find something.
Yeah.
The question is, because it seems like Nyx Bloom Ancient when you read it the first time.
Yeah. You're like, 7 mana, triple my mana. Nyx Bloom Ancient's great. This must be great.
Yeah, but Nyx Bloom is when you tap a permanent for mana.
Yeah.
And this is when you tap a basic land for mana.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like the difference between Cabal Coffers and Cabal Stronghold, right? Like,
which is a huge
difference.
Yeah.
Like Cabal Coffers is 2 mana tap for all the swamps you have, which usually combined with Urborg, you make 8 mana. Cabal Stronghold is 3 mana and tap to do it, and you make for the basic swamps you have, which is usually like 5,
3,
if you're lucky.
4. Yeah, and that's in a mono black.
Right.
You can't even run it in 2 color.
No, you can't run it in 2 color at all. So
this
right
is
off the bat,
strictly mono green?
I think so. You can play a 2-color deck on all basics. It's rougher than you think it is.
Yeah. If there was a color that you would do that more often, it is green because of cultivates and rampant growths and stuff.
Yes.
So I think it becomes a little bit more. But in general, if you have 7 lands, and you might have mana dorks and stuff too, I would say in most decks, maximum 4 of those are basics. Maybe. And sometimes it'll be 3. It'll rarely be 5. If you don't build your land base that way, you might have trouble casting all your spells.
How many basics do you have to run before you put this in?
You have to run, of your 37 lands, you have 37
to run roughly
28 probably.
I would think so.
Yeah.
And I tend to run like 25 in my monocolored decks. And just because part of running monocolored is you get to run Wasteland and Demolition Fields, and you get to run
I want
Jukabog and
75% of my lands to be that, so that if I have 7 mana, I have a really good chance that 4 of them are, maybe even 5, because then it's decent. Here's the thing. The thing I'm thinking about is Zendikar Resurgent.
Yeah.
Which
doubles your mana and draws cards.
Yeah, when you pass a creature, cast the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
and was a house back in the day.
Not anymore.
And nobody plays it anymore because you can't. And I love that card. And people always yell at me when I say stuff like this. It's like, it's not my fault, right? I want to play that card. I love Vidalcan Ori. I wish the format was slow enough that I could play it. The problem is, you know what I like even worse? That card sits in my hand, or when I play it, I just lose because I did something so inefficient that I just couldn't stay in the game. And that's what this kind of feels like. And that's Zendikar Surgeon is a better card than this.
Yes.
And we don't play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tripling your basics. I mean, that makes you go from like 3 basics to 9 mana, which is good, but that's not a small ask. So yeah, I agree. I think Virtuo's strength. Maybe if it was 6 mana, maybe if it was 5 mana, we'd be looking at it. But like
very easy to make it too powerful now.
but 7 mana is not going to happen. It's worth noting that it's really good with Root Path Purifier. Remember that? Lands you control and land cards in your library are basic. Everyone was like, this card's busted. And nobody plays it. It's not a very good card. But
I was going to say, no, I do not remember it.
Twitter freaked out.
I mean, when you said remember the card, I was like, I don't remember what this card does.
Remember this card was facetious. Yeah. It's
was this one of those ones everybody said, this should be banned?
Because you're like, I cast a Rampant Growth and I can go get a Bajuka Bog? That's a disaster. And you're like, you're playing a 4-mana creature to make your Rampant Growth better.
Yeah.
It's not
what are you going to do? Hold your Rampant Growth, by the way?
Yeah. I don't know. But now it's a combo.
It'd be way better if Root Path Purifier was a legendary.
There you go.
Yeah.
If it's in the command zone, now we're talking.
Okay, that's different.
It's a build around in the 99 card.
Yeah. And it's the only thing that does that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it was a commander, then you're in mono green, and the only things that you can search for are like Yavawaya.
Yeah, I can find those things anyway.
Got them. Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
Anyway.
That's all the cards we're going to talk about from Wilds of Eldraine, which is a lot. Thank you for sticking with us this whole time. Before we wrap it up, we always sort of touch base to find out what we think are our favorite and also the most powerful cards from the set. So let's start with favorite, Rachel. Mm-hmm. We wrote this down so we don't have to do the 3, 2, 1 thing and say it at the same time. Yeah. What is your favorite? Because Jimmy and I used to just get to here and be like, what is my favorite? And think of it up at that time. We wanted to surprise each other. It was for the entertainment.
No surprises.
It wasn't because we're lazy, I swear. Okay.
This isn't a fun answer. This isn't like a cute, it's Moonshaker Cavalry. I'm really glad that this card exists. It can be very frustrating to play white where you already feel like you're hamstrung and then you only have 2 ways to win the game. Right. Like somebody got my Achroma's Will with like a Gonti or something. And I was like, I literally don't know. I have to hit you with a 6/6 until you die. Like I literally don't have another card that does what I need it to do right now. And just having a little bit of redundancy there is going to go a long way in closing the game out with your big white combat decks.
Mine, I cheated. I have 2. It's Mosswood Dreadknight, which is the boring answer.
It's cool, though.
It's very cool. I love little efficient things. I usually pick something like that makes me feel safe when I have it in my hand.
Yeah.
And I feel safe when I'm like, I'm going to be able to spend every single bit of mana for every turn of this game. I'm going to hit every land drop.
Makes you feel safe?
That is what makes me feel safe.
Yeah, that's nice.
If I look at my hand, I'm like, I'm going to hit every land drop and use all my mana.
Yes.
I almost don't care what I'm doing besides that.
When I hit my land drops, I'm just like, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. I am playing.
Yeah, exactly. I am playing Magic and I'm doing stuff. Yeah. So Mosswood Dreadknight feels like it's going to very much help me with that.
Yes.
But my fun answer was Gruff Triplets.
This is a great answer.
Yeah.
This is the card that you look at and you're like, what can I do with this?
Yeah. Oh, what if I had this?
What if I...
Yeah. What if I had this card?
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what if I had Spy Kit, which changes the name of this into Gruff Triplets? What now?
That's awesome.
That's
actually.
sweet. Okay, and you sack that, and it's a 30th. Whoa!
That's awesome. Or you could Spy Kit something and put all the counters onto whatever has Spy Kit because it's a Gruff Triplets.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Like a walking ballista. Less cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we broke it. We broke Walking Ballista. You heard it here first.
Well, we can 1, 2, 3 this one, but let's talk. What is the most powerful card for in the 99 from Wilds of Eldraine?
We agreed on this one blind. It is 3, 2, 1. Agatha Soul Cauldron.
Every single card, all of the virtues we were talking about is like either Agatha Soul Cauldron can fizzle it and just straight up counter it. The black one, it just exiles the target. The green one, it exiles the target and fizzles the whole spell. The white one, it's great with. Every single card was like in relation to Agatha's Soul Cauldron. It's because this card does it all.
It does so much stuff, yeah.
It's 2 mana.
Yeah, we're going to see this card a lot.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have a high hurdle to clear because it's 2 mana, and also because just the graveyard hate makes it almost playable. So you just need to You just need to have a fair ability to use, like, you don't even have to have complicated plans. Just like, I do like 1/1 counters a little bit. Cool. Now you can play it.
Great. Done.
Oh, I have a couple of activated abilities in my deck. Cool. I can play it.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Really good.
if it wasn't the most powerful, I might have picked it as my favorite, but I felt bad about it.
But it's definitely the most powerful. Yeah. This card's sweet. All right, to the listeners, what do you think about this set? Are you excited about it? What new cards slot perfectly into your existing commander decks? What do you think is the most powerful? Is it also Agatha Soul Cauldron? Probably.
Could be. Some people are going to say Ashiok, I bet.
Yeah, Ashiok is a good answer. I mean, there's also stuff like Talion, which we talked about in the Commander episode, but
true.
Talion is just really powerful in the 99 as well. A lot of cool cards in this set, a lot of really powerful things.
Yeah, anxious to hear from everybody out there. Of course, if you want to pick up any of the cards from Wilds of Eldraine, if you want to get your hands on them, you can order them right now at cardkingdom.com/command. That is the best place to go to order your Magic products, singles, anything at all. It is the place that we order all of our cards from for all of our Game Nights live productions. They are the only ones we trust to get us all the cards with no mistakes, no hassles, all in one package at the time they say they're going to get it to us. And that's really important. Obviously, when we're doing a live show, we're flying across the country or even out of the country. We can't afford to have any sort of mishaps, and that's why we trust Card Kingdom. They do it right. They are just second to none as far as like their shipping prowess. Their shipping, they are powerful at shipping. They are very respectful to shipping.
Every time they ship, they get a little bigger.
They're the virtue of loyalty of shipping.
Again, cardkingdom.com/command. And once those cards are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them. Put them in sleeves, deck box. Go to ultrapro.com/command. That's our affiliate link. You can support the show while supporting your cards. Get some really high quality Magic accessories that make sure that your cards are safe when you're shuffling, safe in storage. Especially when I'm traveling, I really like the satin cubes.
Yep.
The satin towers are a little too chunky for me, but I love the satin cubes because they feel really safe. They're easy to open, so when I'm going through TSA, I know that TSA isn't going to dump them all over the floor, which has almost happened previously. So we love Ultra Pro. We trust them with our products here. Plus, they have some of the coolest products for Magic because they have all of the officially licensed art. They're going to have a ton of Wilds of Eldraine things, so make sure that you're keeping an eye on the website. If you like this set as much as I do, I'm obsessed, honestly. Make sure you're going to Ultra Pro to see what kind of stuff you can pick up over at ultrapro.com/command.
And speaking of traveling, Rachel, you and I and a bunch of members, maybe almost nearly our entire team, is actually going to be traveling very soon to MagicCon Las Vegas. It is the weekend of September 22nd through the 24th, happening, of course, in Las Vegas. We are going to be performing Game Nights Live, the Grand Championship.
Yeah, the finals.
That's right. The winner of Magic 30 last year, which was Jimmy, MagicCon Philadelphia, which was Rachel, MagicCon Minneapolis, which was Kathleen De Vere from Loading Ready Run, and MagicCon Barcelona, which was me. All four of us are meeting up. It's going to be a huge show. We got some really, really exciting stuff planned. We've had a ton of fun doing the show this year. The audience has really loved it. We've had packed crowds, screaming people. We have a lot of fun. We interact with the audience. If you can all make it, long story short, you should.
Yeah.
We'll have a link in the show notes. There might be a QR code or something right now, but to how you obtain badges. Hopefully there's still some badges left. Vegas tends to fill up. It's the biggest show of the year. It is the most fun. There's tons and tons. Everybody from Wizards is going to be there, all your community members and everything else. So strongly recommend you come and hang out with us at MagicCon Vegas if you can make it happen.
Yeah, you should. It's a ton of fun. If you want to see what you're missing, go check out the live shows. We've got all of our live VODs from previous shows, and you can see how cool Game Nights Live really is. Before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone that make these episodes possible. Thank you to Damon Lentz, Eric Lem, Megan Yip, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Greg Blanchett, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, Gabriel Pozos, and of course, Jimmy Wong.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy.
And thank you, Jimmy.
And thank you, Jimmy, who's watching.
He's
see
definitely
you.
watching because he definitely doesn't talk to us enough. He doesn't see us enough. All right, everybody. This was fun. Thanks for coming to hang out. And we've got more Wilds of Eldraine coverage coming up, so stay tuned for sure.
Bye.
See you next time. Peace.
For your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.